The competition rolled on. Isolde, Varric, and the rest paraded through their matches with overwhelming force. Their opponents surrendered without a fight. The ugly incident between Kaelin and Marek did not repeat itself. Then came Kaldor's turn. Luck abandoned him. He drew a prodigy at the 7th level of Starfall transformation. They traded a few blows before Kaldor went down, but he wore no disappointment. He was already glowing over his first victory. An hour later, the second round ended. 106 disciples remained. Kaldric surveyed the crowd and smiled. 106 remain. I'll decide for you. Everyone receives the top 100 reward. Whether you continue is your choice. Joy rippled through the disciples. Kaelin nodded. The white-haired elder knew how to win hearts. Darius stepped forward. Next, we draw lots for the third round. Participation is entirely voluntary. Many, having secured the reward, saw no reason to risk more. In the end, 84 chose to stay. The draw took half an hour. When Kaelin's name was called, he wondered if it was fate. His opponent was Mirabelle. Kaelin, Mirabelle. Darius's deep voice startled them both. Kaelin especially suspected the lottery was rigged. Last match, Marek. This match, Mirabelle. Both had conflicts with him. After a moment's thought, he stepped onto the arena. No reason to hold back. Mirabelle had backed Marek before, and their fight remained unsettled. Mirabelle's expression darkened. He leaped up after Kaelin. Previously, when Kaelin was at the 6th level, Mirabelle could barely suppress him. Now that his opponent had broken through to the 7th, confidence wavered. Still, as an 8th level prodigy with combat strength comparable to the 9th, he wasn't without hope. I never expected to meet you so soon. Mirabelle spoke first, eyes vigilant, aura flaring. Yes, Kaelin smiled faintly. Didn't expect it either. You came causing trouble last time. Our outcome's still undecided. Mirabelle didn't bother explaining. It was pointless. He had indeed stood up for Marek. Then let me see your strength at the 7th level, he roared, aura surging to its peak. The crowd watched intently. Everyone knew the history. Mirabelle, like Marek, had clashed with Kaelin before. Marek had been beaten. Mirabelle had fought to a draw. Who would win now? It's hard to say. If Kaelin was still at 6th level, Mirabelle's chances would be higher. But losing's fine, but will Kaelin pull a knife like he did on Marek? Discussions buzzed, drawing even the elders' attention. Kaldric glanced at Darius. Others might not know, but he did. Darius had rigged the draw, deliberately pairing Kaelin with Marek and Mirabelle. Partly to test Kaelin's strength, partly to give him legitimate revenge. On the arena, Mirabelle roared, moving like a dragon at incredible speed, but he didn't charge. He circled the arena. What's he doing? Someone asked, puzzled. Most didn't understand. Isolde and Varric watched closely. Previously, Mirabelle was considered the second strongest in the selection. They'd viewed him as a rival. Now Kaelin had emerged as an even more dangerous potential enemy. Planning a sneak attack? Kaelin sneered at the circling figure. Give it up! His words didn't stop Mirabelle. A few breaths later, at full sprint, Mirabelle threw 5 throwing knives from different directions, near simultaneous, whistling through the air. Kaelin sneered, patted his storage bag, and the Solari Hastael appeared. He calmly knocked all 5 knives down. But in that moment, Mirabelle vanished, stopped circling, accelerated above Kaelin's head, a powerful longsword in hand. Die! He brought it down. It's a Brindle magic weapon. Someone recognized it. The Aloria Brindel Oramis knife, mid-grade profound level, a tier above the Solari Hastael. Mirabelle's circling had been distraction. The knives both sneak attack and feint. He didn't want a prolonged fight, knew a head-on confrontation against Kaelin was difficult. Kaelin's eyes flashed cold. He didn't turn too late. Loosening his left hand, tightening his right, he poured spiritual power into the spear. It roared like a dragon, stabbing straight at Mirabelle's heart. Mirabelle cursed, abandoned his slash, and dodged. The spear had longer reach. Before the sword could connect, the spear would pierce his heart. In an instant, Kaelin had shattered the attack, simplest, most direct way. The exchange lasted only a moment, yet the crowd fell silent. The air thick with held breath, then came the sharp hisses of inhalation, the low murmurs of disbelief. Lirael, the gaunt elder of the weapon-refining lineage, spoke first, his voice calm. Mirabelle has excellent timing, and he fights without mercy. Though he stands only at the 8th level of Starfall transformation, few at the 9th would best him. Shirith, a woman of striking beauty from the Calvera Darnath line, covered her mouth as she laughed. Then Kalen on the other side must be formidable indeed, 7th level, yet Mirabel dares not meet him head-on. Lirael did not argue. The truth of it was plain. He chuckled. Both are exceptional. A pity Kalen's talent clearly surpasses the others. Sect Master Caldric smiled, sharing the assessment. Mirabel could challenge those above his level, yet Kalen, a full realm lower, had dispatched him with ease. That was proof enough. Sorrel, who oversaw the alchemy lineage, said nothing, his expression remote, hands clasped behind his back. Darius was much the same, stern, seldom smiling. After repelling Mirabel, Kalen did not pause. He gripped the Solaray Astral and seized the initiative. Mirabel was strong, his combat power equal to the 9th level, honed by high-level techniques since childhood, a rare opponent among peers. Yet against Kalen, a realm beneath him, he could only barely defend. In Kalen's hands the spear moved like a living dragon, its ferocity far exceeding anything the Luminar Patriarch had drawn from it. Though the weapon ranked below Mirabel's longsword, it radiated a far more savage aura. Mirabel's grip trembled, his face draining of color. He had known Kalen would be strong, but the reality staggered him. Ridiculous. This is hardly 7th level. I would believe great perfection of starfall transformation. Terrifying. Within a few dozen exchanges, Mirabel faltered. More than a dozen bloody welts marked his body. Kalen remained untouched. Looks like you're not that strong after all. Kalen's voice was calm as he thrust again, the spear's cry like a dragon's roar striking Mirabel's right arm. Mirabel's face twisted. He had given everything and still fell short. I surrender. The words came reluctantly. He knew continuation meant only defeat. Kalen withdrew his spear and did not press the advantage as he had with Marek. First, Mirabel was genuinely powerful. Killing him would not be easy. Even at the same level, Marek would have been no match. Second, the grudge did not run deep enough to warrant it. Mirabel left the ring bloodied, drawing sighs of regret. He had been the favorite after Isolde, hailed as the #1 contender. Now this. Kalen stepped down as well. The battle had been nothing to him. His current strength, still shy of the 9th level, posed no threat. Caldor rushed up, grinning. Big brother, you're ruthless. Beating Mirabel locks you into the top 3. Caldor was vibrating with excitement. He had known Kalen was strong, but not this strong. Top 3 meant a private cultivation cave. Kalen smiled, recalibrating his own measure. To the disciples he was a vengeful force, best left alone. To the outer sect leader and the elders he was a treasure. Apart from Darius, none were seeing him fight for the first time, yet all were stunned. Challenging higher realms was the privilege of geniuses, but the combat power Kalen had just displayed reached at least the 9th level of starfall transformation. His talent was extraordinary. This boy is not bad. The words came from Sorrel, his black hair and severe expression unchanged. The surrounding elders glanced over in surprise. They had known Sorrel for years. His standards were exacting, his praise rarer than phoenix feathers. The competition continued. Round after round thinned the field until fewer than 50 remained. The consensus solidified. Isolde, Kalen, and Varric. Everyone silently agreed. Meet any of the 3, and you simply surrendered. 3 hours slipped by. Evening fell. Eliminations produced the top 20, the top 10, and finally the top 3. As expected, Isolde, Kalen, Varric. Darius announced the final format in a carrying voice. Each of you faces the other 2. Win both matches, you take first. Second and third share the same reward. Only first differs. First match, Kalen, Varric. Kalen glanced at Varric and leaped onto the arena without hesitation. Varric followed instantly. They stood at opposite ends, sizing each other in silence. You're very strong, Varric said after a moment. The first words he had addressed to Kalen directly. My cultivation is higher, but my chances of winning are not high. I sense the same from you, Kalen replied. Varric gave off a quiet, dangerous stillness. He had reached the 8th level unnoticed. His external spiritual fluctuations were unremarkable, yet Kalen felt him more threatening than Mirabel. Varric shook his head with a wry smile. The Ethoria cultivation technique is too tempting. I'll hold nothing back. Neither will I. Varric's aura shifted in an instant. The gentle, low-profile demeanor vanished, replaced by a sudden violent intensity, as if another person entirely now stood there. Kalen frowned. He dared not be careless. The Solaray Astral materialized in his hand. You're strong, so I'm going all out from the start. Varric's face contorted with rage. A wild beast unleashed. Kaelan frowned. His opponent's behavior was deeply wrong. Varric's aura didn't just intensify, it turned violent, and his body followed. His fair skin flushed a feverish crimson, veins corded across his forehead, and his pupils contracted into scarlet pinpoints. A murmur rippled through the stands. Anyone could see the abnormality. "What is happening?" Shirith asked, bewildered. "By his aura, he's become an entirely different person." The surrounding elders fell silent, equally perplexed. Kaldric sighed, his gaze heavy. "This boy, of the Chenvar line. I never imagined." The Chenvar family, Darius, Shirith, and Sorrel, exchanged confused glances. Only Lirael remained calm, eyes fixed on the arena. Kaldric glanced at them. Years ago, the Chenvar family commissioned a first-rank magic weapon. To bind it to their line forever, they used the blood of their direct descendants as a guide during the forging. A collective intake of breath. The Galvorn Halicon Technomar. All eyes turned to Kaldric. He nodded, expressions darkened. The Galvorn Halicon Technomar was a vicious technique. Powerful families used it to ensure artifact loyalty and deter theft. The essence and blood of numerous direct descendants were incorporated into the refining process. The blood nourished the artifact, attuning it to that specific lineage. Thereafter, only those sharing the bloodline could wield it. But the true cruelty lay in the nurturing. After formation, the artifact required a host of that direct bloodline to sustain it within their own body. Only Earth rank or higher artifacts could be stored internally. Hence, every Galvorn Halicon Technomar weapon was at least Earth rank. Human bodies as living sheaths for ritual implements. Several elders glanced at Varric, his face contorted with rage on the arena floor, then at Lirael's unnerving composure. The implication hung unspoken. Lirael surveyed the circle, then smiled wryly. "No need to speculate, I forged that Ithoria weapon." The admission settled heavier than suspicion. "The insidiousness," he continued, "is that once a host is chosen, they must continuously feed the artifact their blood essence. Each feeding inflicts severe harm. Generally, the host doesn't survive past 30. In exchange, they can draw on a portion of the artifact's power to drastically amplify their strength. But the cost escalates, the artifact demands ever more essence. If the host's cultivation falters or their essence runs dry, they're devoured, reduced to a desiccated corpse. Weapon refiners call it a forbidden technique that defies the natural order." A long silence. They had known Lirael for years. Neither his quiet nature nor their friendship had suggested such capacity. "I owed the Chenvar family an immense debt," Lirael said. "That is why I agreed." He paused. "This artifact is a middle-grade Ithoria." No one pressed further. The stronger the artifact, the more terrifying the backlash. All attention returned to the arena. On the stage, Kaelan's frown deepened. Varric's aura radiated like a caged beast at minimum, the great perfection of the Starfall transformation realm. He dared not be careless. His grip tightened on the Solare Hastale. Varric's power kept climbing. Terrifying energy fluctuations warped the air around him, thick with a pungent metallic stench of blood. "Kaelan, come!" Varric roared. The blood energy coiling around him condensed toward his right hand, shaping into the phantom of a crimson longsword. Gasps rose from the disciples. The displayed strength was monstrous. "Is this still Starfall transformation?" It feels like the Seraphis realm. Isolde, the strongest of their generation, watched with solemn eyes. She wasn't confident she could defeat him in this state. A collective chill passed through the crowd for Kaelan. The elders were no less stunned. In previous years, the highest cultivation among Zereth outer disciples reached only the 8th level of Starfall transformation. This year brought Isolde at the 9th, Varric and Mirabelle at the 8th, and Kaelan an irregular who fought above his level, a rare convergence. Varric moved, lightning fast, his body wreathed in crimson energy that stained the ground red beneath his feet. Kaelan advanced to meet him, Solare Hastael raised, every nerve alert. The first clash rang out, then another and another. Though the longsword was a phantom, it behaved with physical solidity. Meeting the Solare Hastael, it yielded nothing, even pressing a subtle advantage. Kaelan's surprise sharpened. Varric was the strongest opponent he had ever faced, far beyond the Luminar family head. "Kill." Varric's bloodshot eyes locked on him. The phantom blade slashed downward. Kaelan coiled the Solare Hastael to intercept midair. The impact numbed his wrist. In that moment he recognized the state, similar to a misty immortal palace disciple who had taken the Galvorn burning Pilvora, yet more deranged and stronger. Kill, 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 Varric shrieked, face twisted, attacking like a madman. Kalen sensed it clearly now. Varric's will was nearly extinguished, gradually suppressed by whatever force drove him. He was a beast wielding a blood-red phantom sword, knowing no retreat, no defense, only relentless, mindless offense. This was the most brutal match the arena had seen in days. Kalen's terrifying power was no secret. He was a nemesis to many, but Varric had always been a cipher, known only for a high cultivation level no one had witnessed in action. Even Kalen, whom they considered a benchmark, could barely hold ground. Shirith stood below the platform, face grim. He had come on another errand entirely. Watch Varric, report anything irregular to the Chenvar family. Varric roared, a beast unleashed. His phantom sword had already carved bloody furrows across Kalen's body, and the scent of blood only sharpened his ferocity until his face was no longer human. All you know is killing, Kalen frowned, the Solari Hastile straining to block each illusory strike. He guessed Varric had burned some secret technique to force this enhancement. It couldn't last. A war of attrition. A smile curled Kalen's lips, terrible in its calm. I've never been afraid. The spectators whispered. Has he gone mad? How can he laugh now? He's broken. Varric is too strong. No, Kalen's ruthless. Fear isn't in him. Kaldor's face was equally grim. He had been confident in Kalen, but Varric's current state chilled him. On the dais, Kaldric and the four elders said nothing. Their eyes never left the arena. They saw what the crowd missed. Kalen was fading, barely parrying, but Varric was burning vital essence at a ruinous rate. When the fuel ran out, the fire would gut him. Half an hour passed. Kalen's white robes hung in tatters. The tiger's mouth of his grip had split, blood dripping steadily from his palm onto the stone. Varric bore wounds too, but they were superficial. His face had grown only more bestial. He shouted again, the only word he had spoken since the fight began, repeated like a mantra. Kill. Kill. Kill, Kalen cursed, tightened his grip, and met the charge. He withheld his signature forms, the air when smashing Lockhaven and the Ravent Silthor Tarnis. The cost was too high. A miscalculation would leave him empty against a man who felt no pain. And this was a competition, not a duel to the death. He would not accidentally kill his opponent. Their weapons thundered together. Varric's phantom longsword scored cracks into the Solari Hastale. A gasp rippled through the stands. The Hastale was a Brindor magic weapon. Varric wielded no artifact, only blood energy given shape. The disciples watching felt the gulf between them and the combatants. Same age. How could the difference be this vast? Varric surged again, bloodshot eyes fixed on nothing but the kill, mind reduced to the mechanics of tearing Kalen apart. Kalen inhaled, hands white-knuckled on the shaft. Trading injury for injury was suicide against a man who had lost all reason. You could not bargain with instinct. The elders and Kaldric wore matching gravity, shaken by the strength of two newly initiated disciples. This Kalen is no ordinary cultivator, Sorrel said. 7th level Starfall transformation, and this strong Sorrel's standards were legendary. The elders had never heard him praise anyone so highly. Not simple, Phoenix murmured, shaking her head. If this drags on, Varric loses. What a waste. Both have emptied themselves here. Whoever wins won't stand a chance against Isolde. No one argued. It was truth. Varric hadn't expected Kalen to endure this long in his augmented state. The plan, crush Kalen at peak output, conserve spiritual power, then ride the same state against Isolde. He had underestimated Kalen. Kalen was equally surprised. Same 8th level as Mirabelle, but Varric's strength dwarfed hers. Darius's face was thunder. Kaldric glanced at him, sighed, said nothing. Only Kaldric knew Darius had rigged the bracket Kalen first against Varric, a test by fire. Kalen had crushed Marek at equal level, beaten Mirabelle a level above. Darius wanted to see how the three true contenders measured up. Even Darius hadn't anticipated Varric's ruthlessness when cornered. The quiet, unremarkable disciple hid a monster. If Kalen knew the manipulation, what would he feel? Now Kalen felt his organs churning. Varric remained at peak, relentless, spiritual energy draining fast. No time to enter the astral chart of Evernight and replenish. Only endurance remained. The protracted battleground on. Another quarter hour, the blood mist around Varric thinned, his strike slowed. Pupils dilated, returning to human proportion. It's over! Kaldrick said from below. The elders nodded. Varric had hit his limit. On the platform, Kalen saw it too. He was drenched in blood, strength spent. Varric tried to press forward, but his body locked. The phantom sword dissolved. The crimson aura of violence evaporated. Is it over? Kalen murmured. Varric collapsed to his knees with a heavy impact. The flush drained from his face, leaving it corpse pale. His pupils stayed wide, fixed, empty. The battle was decided. Kalen stood as the victor, bloodied but standing. Darius appeared in the arena's center in a flash of movement, his gaze sweeping over Kalen and then Varric, who lay motionless as a corpse. Kalen wins the first match. The announcement rippled through the onlookers. The brutality of the fight had left them stunned. Chenvar surged forward the moment the words fell, desperate to reach Varric. If something had happened to him, Chenvar would never forgive himself. Kaldrick glanced at Sorrel and chuckled, low and dry. This one's half dead at best. Heaven truly envies talent. Sorrel's lip curled. He dug into his pocket and tossed a jade bottle across the space between them, his disgust palpable. Good to know how to refine pills, at least. Kaldrick caught it with a smile, already turning toward the arena. Wait! Sorrel's voice stopped him. Another bottle flew through the air. This one's for Kalen. Kaldrick glanced at it, surprised, then nodded. He moved like light itself, materializing in the arena. The first bottle went to Chenvar. Give it to him. Thank you, Sectmaster. Chenvar didn't ask what it was. He uncorked it and poured the contents into Varric's mouth with trembling hands. Color returned to Varric's face. His eyelids fluttered. Kaldrick exhaled, then tossed the second bottle to Kalen. Kalen caught it, stunned. He hadn't expected anything. Kaldrick smiled. Eldamir gave it to you. Accept it. Eldamir, Sorrel? Kalen looked up toward the stands. Sorrel's face was impassive, serious. Their eyes met. Sorrel gave a slight nod. Kalen bowed from a distance, respectful, then opened the bottle. 3 black pills. He swallowed one. Warmth bloomed in his throat, spreading through his chest and limbs, a current that settled deep and radiated outward. In moments, his spiritual energy had recovered by more than half. He'd planned to enter the astral chart of Evernight and consume herbs, but there was no need now. Darius, standing close, recognized the pill. A grade 3 elixir, Silwyn Pilvora. His gaze shifted to Kaldrick, strange and measuring. Kaldrick was equally surprised. The pill he'd given Varric was only 2nd grade. He hadn't expected Sorrel's second bottle to hold a grade 3, and Kalen had taken only one, pocketing the rest. Proof there were more. How willing the old man is to part with it. Could it be? His eyes lit with a bold guess. Sorrel had taken a liking to Kalen, wanted him as a disciple. If so, things would get interesting. He looked at Darius, smiling, saying nothing, leaving the other man speechless. Darius surveyed the arena. The second match begins in 1 hour. Kalen versus Isolde. Murmurs erupted. Isolde was the recognized favorite 9th level of Starfall transformation. Kalen was known as ruthless, vengeful. Notice how everyone who fights Kalen ends badly. A whisper. But Cultivator's hearing carried it far. The observation landed. None of his opponents had walked away whole. Varric's color continued to improve as Chenvar helped him down. Resentment burned in his eyes, but beneath it lay grudging conviction. He had used the sealed artifact within him. It hadn't been enough. Kalen exhaled, the Jorvath Pilvora settling. Bleeding stopped. Spiritual power surged. He slipped from the arena, seeking a quiet corner to enter the astral chart. Isolde stood waiting, brow furrowed. Both opponents were formidable at peak. She wasn't certain she could beat either. The advantage was hers, yet satisfaction eluded her. Must I fight them broken? Varric would need months. Kalen covered in wounds. How much could an hour restore? The victory would be hollow. Kalen found a secluded spot. Kaldor approached, concern etched in his weathered face. I need to rest, watch my surroundings. Kalen closed his eyes, consciousness sinking into the astral chart of Evernight. Experience told him the transition would be undetectable. Inside, he consumed spiritual medicine without restraint. Elixirs seeped into damaged tissue, knitting him whole. Pills surpass herbs, no matter the herb's rarity. The thought surfaced unbidden. He'd taken pills before, none had hit like this. He didn't know the grade of Sorrel's gift, but its recovery speed and potency dwarfed raw herbs. I'll need to cultivate a connection with Sorrel, partly from genuine interest in alchemy, partly because he needed to refine the Astravi Pilvora. He believed Sorrel had reached third-grade alchemy, but he wouldn't ask for help. He wanted to refine it himself. Time compressed. An hour vanished. Kalen opened his eyes. Aura stable, spiritual power at 90%. External wounds sealed. He could fight. Isolde stood in the arena, cold and waiting. Kalen stepped onto the arena floor. Opposite him, Isolde's face remained a mask of winter, beautiful and utterly still. Darius appeared in a flash of light, glanced at Isolde, then fixed his gaze on Kalen. A soft sound of surprise escaped him. Kalen's blood energy surged vigorous and whole. The wounds from the previous match had nearly vanished. Darius had carried a sliver of guilt. His interference had forced Kalen to fight Varric first, costing him a near-certain shot at first place. That guilt evaporated. The third match begins, the words barely left Darius's mouth before he streaked away, rejoining Caldric and the elders below. Kalen exhaled, studying the woman before him. Her beauty was the kind that stopped breath, yet her eyes held no warmth. Isolde glanced at his healed wounds, her brow furrowing faintly. "You are seriously injured. It would be unfair to defeat you like this, so I will use only half my strength." Her voice was cold, melodic, carrying an odd courtesy. Kalen blinked. He hadn't expected such words from her. A cough masked his momentary disorientation. "No need. My injuries are fine, just fight normally." He wondered if she was simple. This match decided first place. Even with cave dwellings already secured, the winner earned first pick of a low-level cultivation technique. Her logic escaped him entirely. "You said it yourself, you lecherous thief. Prepare to die." A silver-white longsword materialized in her hand. Its light biting, no ordinary weapon. Kalen stared, bewildered. First words exchanged, and already a lecher. And from her stance she meant to kill. He wasn't careless. The Solare Hastael formed in his grip, rising to meet her strike. Impact rang through the arena. Isolde frowned, flowed past the block, and pressed the assault. Her swordsmanship was superb, each slash hissing through air, yet Kalen turned them all aside. "Are you really all better now?" After more than 10 exchanges, she asked, voice still cold. He moved with nimble precision, breathing perfect, strikes powerful, no hint of injury anywhere. "Didn't I just say my injury was nothing?" Kalen's jaw tightened. "Liar, you're asking for it." A flash of genuine anger cracked her composure. Her sword force jumped 3 degrees. Kalen's own temper flared. He'd been clear from the start. Where was the lie? And the lecher accusation, what did that even mean? Isolde's features, usually frozen, burned with rare heat as she drove strike after strike at vital points. In her mind, the label had stuck since the Bone Age test when he'd stared too long. She'd intended a fair fight, holding back. Discovering him unharmed felt like mockery. The more she thought, the hotter her blade grew. Kalen felt the shift. He knew she was ruthless, but not like this. At the 9th level of Starfall transformation, Isolde stood among geniuses who could challenge higher realms. She wielded strength at great perfection of that realm. Few at her level could match her. How ruthless. He sensed the power humming in her longsword, only a shade below Varric's. She was attacking in a normal state. When she'd said 50%, she hadn't been boasting. She had indeed held back at the start. Below, Caldric and the elders watched with keen interest. Unlike the brutal previous match, this one held a strange entertainment. Isolde's beauty made every sword arc captivating. Kalen looked pitiful in his tattered, blood-stained white robe, yet his movements told another story. "Who do you think will win?" Caldric smiled at the 4 elders. Shirith covered her mouth, laughing. "I don't know, but Kalen's injuries are healing incredibly fast. Brother Mirith, your pills are really effective." All eyes turned to Sorrel. He stood tall, proud, offering no explanation, the arrogant silence of a master alchemist. In truth, he was puzzled himself. A Sylvan Pilvora aided spiritual power and injury, but full healing in an hour was impossible. He would never admit that. Darius glanced at Sorrel, then at Caldric's grin. Could the old man also have designs on Kalen? A cold spike of crisis drove deeper the longer he considered it. The fight was neither spectacular nor epic. Isolde, disliking rough brawling, measured every strike with precise force. They appeared ordinary only because the power was concealed. Kalen felt it most keenly. Despite her unremarkable aura, each blow carried tremendous weight. Her swordsmanship ran deep, her speed extreme. He couldn't create the distance his spear required, forced into pure defense. Frustration welled in Kalen, the sensation of strength with nowhere to land. Once a spear wielder was closed on, advantage vanished. Isolde's longsword was at least mid-grade ashen. The Solari Hastale, already damaged from Varric, accumulated fresh nicks with every exchange. Isolde is too strong. No wonder she's number one. This Jinx is in trouble. Looks like he can't beat her. You can't say that. Kalen fought fiercely last round and he's still injured. Wait, look. Why is Kalen putting away his spear? Amid the rising clamor, the subject of their speculation calmly stored the Solari Hastale into his storage bag. A long sword rested in his hand. When Kalen drew a Brindor longsword, the crowd erupted. They had not expected him to wield a blade at all, let alone a second Brindor artifact. Whispers rose. Were Brindor weapons so common now? He was merely a son-in-law. Where had he acquired such things? Lyriel frowned, turning the weapon in his hand. This sword, it bears the mark of the misty immortal palace. Caldric glanced over. What of it? The others followed his gaze, Sorrel among them. Lyriel was the authority on weaponcraft. It was forged there. The question is how it reached him. Murmurs rippled through the onlookers. No one doubted Lyriel's eye, but the implication was troubling. An escapee from the palace, a spy. Shirith's voice was cold, her dislike of the palace evident. Unlikely? Caldric dismissed the notion. If the palace sent him, he would know better than to carry their signature so openly. Silence settled. No one countered. Enough speculation, Caldric said. I have investigators on his background. They will return soon. Better to wait until the match ends and ask him directly. On the arena floor, Isolde's face darkened further. You dare insult me? Kalen blinked, genuinely bewildered. Wait, insult you? How? Explain. He still did not understand what a lecherous thief meant. But this was different. He had only drawn a sword. Using a sword before me is an insult. Her expression twisted. Scoundrel, prepare to die. She lunged, blade raised. Kalen felt the absurdity crashing over him. The Solari Hastale had failed him. He had switched weapons out of necessity, not provocation. If she were not so overwhelmingly strong, he would never have abandoned his spear. Even if I use a sword, it hardly concerns you, he said, voice sharpening. Does that mean no one else may wield one? She faltered, struck silent. Beautiful, proud, radiating the chill that had always cowed men into reverence. She had never been mocked like this. You deserve to die. Her face went near black. She raised her sword, chanting, Thalwen spirit, gladius, ignite. Blue flame erupted along the blade, swallowing the steel in fire. Kalen frowned, a sharp sense of danger prickling his skin. The watching disciples stirred. At the Starfall transformation realm, most relied on artifacts or physical strikes. Spellcraft was weak below the Tengara realm, yet she had coaxed blue flame from her weapon. Caldric's eyes narrowed. This girl is no ordinary talent. She has already touched the first level of her family's ancestral art. Thalwen spirit gladius, Shirith murmured. The Blackthorn's secret technique. Correct. Still crude, far from perfected, but to wield it at this cultivation, remarkable. He had seen the Blackthorn arts before. Their power was legendary. That she could manifest even the initial stage here spoke of extraordinary gifts. You scoundrel, prepare to die. Isolde's longsword burned with blue flame, the cold fire outlining her face in a way that should have been beautiful. Kalen found himself speechless, though not for the reason anyone would assume. Lecher, swindler, womanizer. The reputations cycled through his mind, each more absurd than the last, even as their blades met again with a pair of sharp reports. His Brindor sword, a low-grade relic from the misty immortal palace, should have outclassed her Solari Hastale. Instead, he felt the strain in every parry. The cyan flames coating her blade carried no heat. Up close, they radiated a penetrating cold that sank through metal and into bone. His wrist, locked around the hilt, had gone numb, the joints stiffening as though he'd plunged his hand into a winter river. Cold fire. He had never encountered its like. Darian's technique had frozen the soul, slowing movement without touching flesh. This was different. The chill was tangible, crawling up his arm with each contact, a physical weight rather than a spiritual one. What is this? The question barely formed before Isolde's next strike whistled past his guard. Her aura flickered. Maintaining the flames cost her, but her slash still found his left arm. Fabric parted, skin tore, no blood welled. The wound smoked with blue fire, and his arms simply stopped obeying him, not paralyzed, frozen. The tissues had turned rigid as winter wood. He retreated, face ash gray, the cold already spreading through his veins. Each heartbeat sent fresh needles of pain radiating outward. In the stands, the elders watched in silence. "The Blackthorn family's secret arts are extraordinary," one murmured. Darius, arrogant and spare with words, asked, "What grade?" Caldric shook his head, a wry twist to his mouth. "No grade recorded, just a family technique. But it is not simple." No one pressed further. The implications settled over the pavilion like frost. At their cultivation, profound core and above, physical wounds were trivial. Bodies could be regrown so long as the golden core survived. But this flame did not merely damage flesh, it froze the blood, slowed the chi, turned every injury into a systemic collapse. Against an equal, a single cut could decide the match. Below, Kalen fumbled through his storage bag. Water. Cloth. Salves. Talismans. Nothing touched the fire. Water hissed and evaporated without warming. The flame burned atop the wet fabric, indifferent. The cold in his arm deepened, throbbing in time with his pulse. "You lecherous scoundrel," Isolde said, her voice tight with exertion. "The Thalwen Ulvaris never extinguishes, not while I have spiritual power to feed it." She was right. The flame was bound to her will, a persistent curse, rather than a simple combustion. Kalen's jaw tightened. Pain lanced through him with every breath, his blood turning to slush in his veins. The spectators had already decided. Finished, no match for a 9th-level Starfall transformation cultivator. Not at 7th level. Even Caldric and the elders had written him off. They knew the Thalwen Ulvaris. They knew they could not counter it themselves. Then Kalen's eyes hardened. He raised his right hand high, sword gripped tight, and brought the blade down toward his own left arm. The arena fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the wet thud of severed flesh hitting stone. No one could quite process what they had just witnessed. Kalen had driven his own blade into his left arm, shearing away half the limb in a spray of blood and dying blue flame. The moment the corrupted flesh fell, the azure fire guttered out and the creeping chill in his veins vanished, replaced by a searing, clean pain. Swallowed breaths hissed through the crowd. "Isn't he a bit too ruthless? A madman. An absolute madman." The consensus settled quickly. A man who would turn a blade on himself would show no mercy to anyone else. Isolde's pupils contracted to pinpoints. She had never imagined he would purge her flames through self-mutilation. "This little guy is ruthless enough," Eldamir murmured. The surrounding elders nodded in grim agreement. "If someone can be this ruthless to themselves in a friendly spa," Lirael said, "they'll be even more ruthless to others." True enough, Marek's fate had already proven that. Kalen's left arm gushed. No time for proper treatment, he fished a hemostatic pill from his storage bag and swallowed it dry. Unless one reached the Tengara realm, severed limbs did not regenerate. He had genuinely considered amputating the entire arm seconds ago. The pill took hold quickly, the bleeding slowed, and when he clenched his fist, the fingers responded. Functional. Good enough. "You lecherous thief, prepare to die." Isolde's surprise did not linger. The Thalwen Ulvaris had drained her as well. She needed to end this before her reserves ran dry. Kalen exhaled, measuring her. Facing her head-on was more dangerous than facing Varric at his craziest. That blue flame was a nightmare, and cutting himself free had cost plenty. He chose retreat instead, circling the vast arena's perimeter. She pursued, but the distance held. He glanced back, a cold calculation hardening his eyes. A spear whistled through the air, streaking toward Isolde with lethal speed. She halted, barely raising her longsword to deflect it. 3 more followed in rapid succession, yellow-rank magical spears, hidden until now. Curses rose from the stands. No one expected thrown weapons, let alone spears of that caliber. "You lecherous scoundrel, you deserve to die," Isolde sneered at the ambush, yet also dismissed it as naive. Did he truly believe a handful of spears could defeat her? She leaped, twisting mid-air to dodge the trio aimed at her blind spots. Kalen was already there, descending from above with a longsword strike timed to her jump. He had anticipated the evasion, pre-aiming the spears to herd her into this exact trajectory. She frowned, white robes unmarked since the battle began, now facing pressure she had not expected. The Thalwen Ulvaris had consumed over 70% of her spiritual energy. She had not deployed it lightly. Without it, she could not defeat Kaelin at his peak. She had watched his fight with Varric and knew his strength. Yet the passionate young man who had fought to the death now chose a sneak attack against a woman? She could hardly believe it, but as the strongest contestant and a direct Blackthorn descendant, she would not fall so easily. She tapped her storage bag. A jet-black greatsword, over a meter long, materialized in her left hand, radiating a sense of immovable weight and indestructibility. Kaelin frowned at the strange weapon, but he was committed. No retreat now. She hovered, greatsword in left hand, longsword in right, a bizarre and terrifying dual wield. The instant the greatsword appeared, she swung it in a wide arc to bat aside the 3 incoming spears, while raising her right blade horizontally to catch his descending strike. The spears deflected effortlessly. His longsword met only air. Without pause, she reversed the greatsword's momentum into a vicious backhand arc aimed at his mid-air form. He wrenched his blade back to block. The impact shuddered through his wrist, a tingling shock that traveled to his shoulder. The greatsword's power far exceeded his own, even surpassing Varric's brute force. At that same instant, her longsword, wreathed in blue flame, slashed toward his exposed flank. Kaelin did not hesitate. He relaxed his wrist, letting the greatsword's recoil hurl him backward, and twisted clear of the flame-wreathed blade. In a heartbeat, he opened a gap of several hundred meters. He was panting heavily, the exchange having been far more dangerous than he'd anticipated. The black greatsword possessed remarkable defensive capabilities, and though its attack speed was slow, its power was surprising. The eerie blue flames were worse. Isolde did not pursue. Her physical aura had grown even more disordered, a clear sign that wielding the weapon exacted a steep toll. She cursed under her breath, realizing they had forced the Chimera Gladius from her hand. The blade was her greatest trump card, reserved for self-defense, yet Kaelin had compelled her to draw it here. From the start, she had never intended to use it. Wielding the Chimera Gladius consumed more energy than the Thalwen Ulvaris. Around the arena, spectators murmured in awe. One marveled at the sword's palpable power, another at its sheer size and weight, a third at the revelation of Isolde's hidden ace. The chatter continued, but at the arena's edge another figure took notice. Varric stood covered in injuries, his face deathly pale, barely able to remain upright. After his fight with Kaelin, Shirith had helped him to a corner to recuperate. He had just woken when the clash began. Both combatants were formidable. He was certain that without the Athorian magic weapon sealed within him, neither would be his match. The elders watched with visible surprise. On one hand, Kaelin, such a tenacious fighter, had resorted to a sneak attack. On the other, the Chimera Gladius itself commanded recognition. Their discerning eyes marked its extraordinary nature. "What level of magic weapon is this?" Darius asked, glancing toward Lirael. "High-grade Ashen rank," Lirael replied. Darius nodded, though he already suspected as much. The sword's displayed power and the instant chaos in Isolde's spiritual energy both pointed to enormous consumption. "This girl is no ordinary person," Caldric said. "I didn't expect the Blackthorn family to value her so highly. 18 years old, a genius at the 9th level of the Starfall transformation realm, capable of using Thalwen Ulvaris, and in possession of a high-grade Ashen magic weapon." The elders fell silent. They could sense her standing in the Blackthorn family. Direct descendants were rarely entrusted with artifacts of this caliber. On the arena floor, Kaelin exhaled. He had entered the battle in poor condition, and the exertion had severely depleted his spiritual energy. Isolde had fared worse. She had already burned through 10% of her reserves. In the short time she'd held the Chimera Gladius, he himself retained perhaps 20%. A moment later, her icy voice carried across the stone. "Kaelin, you are very strong. If you can withstand my next sword strike, you win this match." She had no intention of prolonging the fight. Delay served her poorly. She would pour everything into the Chimera Gladius. One move would decide it. His expression did not change, nor did he answer. But his aura surged. He too wanted this finished, though he sensed she was more exhausted than he. Every eye fixed on the platform. The elders stilled, their idle conversation forgotten. Isolde drew a breath and returned the silver longsword to her storage bag. She gripped the Chimera Gladius with both hands, raising it high. Her white robe seemed to glow against the dim light, her black hair floating as if suspended in water. Her face was stern, her aura climbing until powerful gusts radiated outward, cracking the blue stone beneath her feet inch by inch. The gathering pressure was terrifying. Faced with her, Kalen did not dare complacency. He tapped his storage bag and the solary Astral materialized in his grasp, a dragon-shaped spear in his left hand, a magical longsword in his right. His brows furrowed as his aura rose steadily. He could dodge the attack and claim an easy victory. He did not intend to. When her momentum peaked, it halted. The Kynara Gladius emitted a dark light, its presence overwhelming. With a clear, cold shout, she brought the massive blade down in a two-handed slash, unleashing a jet of black sword energy that streaked 100 meters toward Kalen. Grey stone slabs shattered in its wake, the imposing force crushing the air itself. Kalen cried out, his own shout meeting hers. The spear and sword in his hands hummed as he mobilized every last reserve of strength to meet the attack. Faced with that seething black sword energy, Kalen did not dare the slightest carelessness. He summoned every dreg of spiritual power he had left, his aura flaring as he poured it into the Solari Hastael and the magical longsword. Twin blades blazed and he unleashed a strike that met the darkness in a thunderclap. The arena vanished beneath flying sand and billowing smoke, a deafening roar battering eardrums. The shockwave knocked onlookers back steps before they found their footing. All eyes locked on the field where the collision of two immense forces had birthed a thick grey mist that swallowed the stage whole. "Who won?" a disciple shouted. "Is Kalen dead?" That attack was terrifying. I could barely stand from here. The crowd fell into a hushed murmur, gazes fixed on the impenetrable grey. Most were already writing the young man's obituary. Caldric and several elders saw through the mist as if it were glass. "The outcome is decided," Caldric sighed. "This little guy is no ordinary opponent." The elders around him nodded. After more than 10 breaths, the mist thinned, revealing the wreckage. Isolde's white robes were coated in dust, her cuffs shredded, her greatsword driven into the ground. She clung to the hilt with one hand, chest heaving, a crack in the icy mask she usually wore. Kalen looked far worse. His robe had been reduced to hanging strips. He knelt on one knee, blood streaming from his mouth. Through the tatters, exquisitely sculpted muscles showed, and a blood and dust-stained cloth bound his chest. "I won," he rasped, hauling himself upright. Despite the ruin of his body, a bright smile cracked his face. Isolde's beautiful eyes burned with resentment, but she had to admit she was outmatched. She paused, drew a deep breath, and sealed the giant sword into her storage bag. Without the weapon's weight, she listed forward, nearly stumbled, caught herself. She gave him a long, unreadable look, turned and walked off the stage. Kalen let out a sound between a laugh and a groan and dropped heavily onto the stone, panting, grin still wide. That strike, the strongest blow a high-grade ashen-level weapon could deliver, had nearly reduced him to ash. Why did she step down? Is she admitting defeat? Over already? Murmurs rippled through the stands. Most disciples had no idea what they had just witnessed. Darius flashed onto the arena, glanced at the young man sitting in the dust, and announced in a voice that rolled across the grounds, "Kalen is the first-place winner of this outer disciple selection competition." Varric's expression was complicated where he sat in the audience. "I never expected you to win." He had fought a brutal battle with the victor himself, and that was after Kalen had only an hour's rest before facing Isolde and winning again. At that moment, Varric was convinced. Completely convinced. The crowd erupted. Few had predicted this outcome. A cultivation base only at the 7th level of the Starfall transformation realm. Yet he had prevailed despite a prior grueling fight. Proof enough of his strength. "We won. We really won." Kaldor beamed, disbelief shining on his face. Standing beside Varric, Chenvar looked equally enlightened. That boy from the Spirit Stone mine a few months ago had just become the #1 candidate in this year's outer sect selection for the Zereth Immortal Sect. The elders were deeply impressed. At the early stage of the 7th level of Starfall transformation, he withstood that kind of attack, Lyrael said. "I doubt there are many in the entire realm who could match him." The surrounding elders nodded. Even the notoriously discerning Sorrel admitted, "If this little guy grows up, he'll be absolutely terrifying." 7th level Starfall transformation, is this strong? Shirith said, covering her mouth with a smile. "I certainly didn't have this strength when I was in that realm." A few sideways glances answered her. "You play with formations. Your actual combat strength has never been great. Why compare?" Caldric chuckled. "You lot shouldn't praise him too much. Geniuses need time to grow. I'm curious to see how far this young man will go. A good sapling must weather storms to become a towering tree, but before it takes shape, the seedling is terribly fragile. The world never lacks for geniuses, only for those who survive long enough to matter. After a brief recovery, Kalen stepped down from the platform. First place was already his, the remaining matches were irrelevant. He found a quiet corner and closed his eyes. 2 consecutive fights had drained him deeply. Kaldor stood watch beside him, his round face set in serious lines, eyes scanning the crowd. An hour later, Kalen opened his eyes. The spiritual medicines he had consumed inside the astral chart of Evernight had knit his strength back together. Next came the battle for second between Varric and Isolde. When Darius called their names, both chose to abstain. The hall stirred, then settled into understanding. The rewards for second and third were identical save for reputation, and neither fighter had the strength to continue. Varric was pale, his life essence guttering at less than 20%. Isolde, though uninjured, had emptied her spiritual reserves completely. The outer sect selection competition has ended, Darius announced, his voice carrying clear across the square. Kalen takes first place, Isolde and Varric are tied for second. The ruling had been settled after consultation with Kaldric and the other elders. With the rewards equal, a tie was the cleanest resolution. Kaldric mounted the platform, his gaze sweeping the assembled disciples. Kalen, Isolde, Varric remain. The rest of you, along with the stewards and deacons, may depart to prepare for entry into the Zareth immortal sect. 500 outer disciples had been chosen. Their rankings were set. The stewards led them away to assigned courtyards, distribute the blue robes of their new status, hand out ranking rewards, and explain what came next. The top 3 were escorted before Kaldric and the gathered elders, hands clasped in respect. Kaldric smiled. Come, we'll speak in the main hall. A wave of his hand sent a beam of azure light wrapping around the 3 disciples. His own figure blurred into a streak of light and vanished. The elders, Darius, Shirith, Sorrel, and Lirael, exchanged a glance and followed in a flash. Kalen's vision swam, the speed leaving him momentarily disoriented. In the space of a few breaths they arrived at the outer hall of the Zareth immortal sect. The chamber soared over 100 meters high, vast and solemn, its grandeur pressing against the senses. Even Isolde and Varric, scions of prominent houses, stood somewhat awed. Kaldric flashed to the central seat and settled into it, looking down. Moments later, the 4 elders took the golden thrones arrayed around the hall. Kalen counted 10 thrones in total. 6 sat empty. 6 outer sect elders had yet to appear. You 3 are not bad at all, Kaldric said, his face creasing into a kindly smile, like a friendly neighbor. Very strong. The 3 bowed again, deeper this time, the weight of the hall behind them. Nothing special brought you here, Kaldric continued. Just the matter of your cave dwellings and rewards. The top 3 would receive cultivation caves, a privilege usually reserved for disciples of exceptional talent or steward rank and above. Furthermore, the top 10 could visit the sect library and select an Ashen-level cultivation technique. As first place, Kalen would also receive a low-grade Ithoria technique. All 3 brightened at the news, though Isolde and Varric glanced at Kalen and their expressions dimmed. Ithoria techniques were rare, the chance had slipped past them, and who knew when another would come. Don't be discouraged, Kaldric said, reading their faces. Once you're settled in the sect, you can earn contribution points through tasks. With enough points you can exchange for Ithoria techniques. Of course, the cost is steep. Cultivate diligently. You all have great talent, the inner sect is within reach. Several elders will take you to choose your caves shortly. Isolde, Varric, wait outside the main hall. Kalen, you stay. Yes. They bowed and left, untroubled by curiosity. Kalen was the top performer, different treatment was expected. Now only Kalen, the 4 elders, and Kaldric remained in the vast hall. Kalen kept his expression calm, but his mind was already turning over the reasons they had held him back. Kalen, Kaldric said, do you know why we asked you to stay? Darius spoke first, his voice deep and edged with quiet command. This disciple does not know. Kalen clasped his hands in respect. Where did you get that Brindle magic weapon longsword? The question landed like a weight, every eye in the hall fixed on the young disciple. The Zareth immortal sect and the Misty immortal palace had been bitter rivals for generations, each willing to annex the other given the chance. Infiltration and intelligence gathering were open secrets, never acknowledged publicly. Reporting to the Eldemir, Kalen said, his voice steady, neither humble nor arrogant. This magic weapon was obtained after killing an outer disciple of the misty immortal palace. A ripple of shock passed through the dais. Caldric and the four elders stared. He killed an outer disciple of the misty immortal palace, and they still dare show their faces at the Zareth immortal sect. Explain this matter from the beginning, Darius said, his voice low. The elders and sect master leaned in. Kalen recounted the story methodically. Torin joining the misty immortal palace. Gavrik sent to Iron Peak City to capture him. He spoke of his circumstances in the Korith family, of becoming the Valar family's live-in son-in-law. He made no mention of the astral chart of Evernight, attributing his progress instead to an inexplicable improvement in aptitude after waking. The elders present were all profound core realm cultivators. They could judge truth from lies by tone and heartbeat alone. When Kalen finished, he bowed with clasped hands. The elders exchanged glances, then turned as one to Caldric. The sect master nodded slowly, confirming he had detected no deception. The young man's words were true. Kalen, please leave the main hall first. We have something to discuss. He nodded and turned to go. As his figure disappeared, strange expressions crossed the faces of the elders and sect master alike. This little guy actually signed a life or death agreement with disciples of the misty immortal palace, then openly killed them on the arena, Shirith asked, disbelief and a glitter of excitement warring in her eyes. She seemed in high spirits that he had killed one of theirs, beaten half to death by his own younger brother, then sold off as a live-in son-in-law for a mere 1,000 spirit stones. This kid's background is truly tragic. You've all investigated thoroughly, haven't you? He wasn't lying. My investigation confirms it, he definitely wasn't lying. Several elders and the sect leader discussed the matter, marveling at the young man's extraordinary encounter. Beaten nearly to death by his own brother, sold off, only to wake with drastically altered aptitude and cultivation speed that defied belief. How credible do you think his account is? Caldric asked. At least the beginning should be true. It not only has nothing to do with the misty immortal palace, but he also bears them a grudge. However, this cultivation speed, several elders were curious. How could someone severely injured and near death have their talent altered? Their first instinct was to suspect a supreme treasure, which would explain his meteoric rise. All right, I know you're curious, but everyone has their own destiny, Caldric said. Opportunities belong to individuals. Everyone must not forget the rules of the Zareth immortal sect, and also, this kid's something else. I think it won't be long before he catches up with us. The elders continued discussing the matter. Ultimately, the decision was made to ignore whether the disciple had any special opportunities. Opportunity was good, but it depended on fate. If one focused solely on seizing it, one might make a fool of oneself and lose one's life. The sect master's words, intentionally or not, served as a reminder to them all. At the entrance of the main hall, Kalen found Isolde and Varric standing at opposite ends of the gate. Neither spoke, each gazing into the distance. He had no idea what held their attention. Hearing footsteps, both turned simultaneously. Seeing him, they exchanged complicated glances. After a moment, Varric spoke. Kalen, you are very strong. It's a pleasure to meet you. Kalen laughed. You're also very strong, at least at the 8th level of the Starfall transformation realm. I have never seen anyone stronger than you. It was absolutely true. Varric was indeed formidable. The compliment left the other man somewhat embarrassed. He had just claimed to be the strongest at the 8th level, yet couldn't beat a 7th level cultivator. He only coughed lightly, keeping his thoughts to himself. Isolde frowned slightly, snorted coldly, and said nothing. But seeing her expression, Kalen could not help but ask. Isolde, I want to ask you, why did you call me a lecher? His face darkened slightly. What did I do to offend you? He had been puzzled for a long time, unable to figure out what he had done to earn the label. She stared coldly at him, her pretty face frosted over. Don't you know what you've done? You still dare to ask me, you lecherous scoundrel, shameless. Kalen was speechless. Could this woman not understand human language? Varric, standing to the side, was also stunned. He never expected such a thing between the two. When they fought, the ring was far below, and few could hear their exchange. He had been unconscious initially, but woke during their battle. Kalen's anger burned hot enough to taste copper. Women are a hassle. The words came out flat, the only release he allowed himself. Seraphina's nagging drilled into his skull. Liriana's vacuous simpering matched Isolde's dullness at the Spirit Stone mine. He found himself thinking the ancients might have had a point. A woman's virtue lies in her lack of talent, women and petty men impossible to deal with. 3 elders emerged from the main hall, Darius, Shirith and Liriel. They had come to escort the new disciples to their cave dwellings. Sorrel would never stoop to such work, his status as an alchemist placed him above it. Liriel, a weapon refiner, held nearly as much prestige, yet ranked a step below, and lacked Sorrel's arrogance. "Kaelin with me," Darius said. "Isolde, come along," Shirith added with a smile. "Varric, you're mine," Liriel finished. The 3 disciples bowed and followed, all headed the same way. The Valora Wilden Pavilion beyond the gate, where initiation clothing and identity tokens awaited. An elder's presence meant no queue. A steward met them at the door. The pavilion's first floor alone could hold thousands. Grey-robed servants and blue-robed outer disciples bustled through the space. Within moments, each disciple received a storage bag. Kaelin probed his with divine sense. 3 sets of blue outer disciple robes, a jade token engraved with Zerith Immortal Sect, and several jade slips. "Remove the identity tokens," the steward instructed. "They've already been imprinted with your divine sense. From now on, they mark you as disciples of the Zareth Immortal Sect." They complied. Faint blue light bloomed from each tablet. Activation confirmed. Kaelin sensed his token's presence, a string of numbers glowing beneath. 50. Earth rank, low grade. "These record your contribution points," the steward explained. "You'll need them for exchanges within the sect. The jade slips contain essential information, study them at your leisure." They thanked him and turned to cave selection. An official unfurled a map of the outer sect's dwellings, scattered across the grounds with varying advantages. Kaelin chose first. First place earned its privilege. He picked a secluded cave rich in spiritual energy. Isolde and Varric followed, selecting dwellings in the same area, not far from his. The steward handed each a golden token. "Inject essence blood. The cave will recognize its master." They did. Once bound, Darius, Shirith and Liriel led them to their new homes. Darius carried Kaelin through the air at blinding speed. Mountains, forest, and dense spiritual energy surrounded the destination, a massive stone gate sealing a cave mouth. As Kaelin approached, the gate rose silently, keyed to his blood. "Yours now?" Darius said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Thank you, Elder, Darius." Kaelin clasped his hands. The Elder's cultivation commanded respect, but more importantly, he had intervened when a deacon tried to sever Kaelin's arm during the Mirabelle incident. "You have talent. Focus on cultivation. Come to me if you need anything." Darius held a high opinion of him, even considered taking him as a disciple, but would observe first. He smiled rarely, then dissolved into a streak of light and vanished. Kaelin turned to the gate, breathing the rich spiritual air. Satisfaction curled his lips as he strode inside, and froze. The scene within shocked him utterly. The cave was spacious and magnificent. Its carved railings and jade steps worn smooth by time. Colorful stalactites lined the walls, catching and fracturing the light. He drew a breath. The spiritual energy here was several times denser than outside, washing through him with a cool, refreshing clarity. No wonder everyone fought for this dwelling. He had only heard rumors before. Seeing it now, he understood why the reputation held. He wandered through the chambers as if on a tour. The place was immaculate, not a mote of dust. A bedroom for rest, a secret room for meditation, a study lined with bookshelves, a tea room with low tables, even a dedicated space for spirit beasts. Spirit beast, he remembered the golden lion still confined in his pouch. Since entering Zareth Immortal Sect territory, he had kept it hidden to avoid attention, packing it away with over 100 pounds of dried meat. After joining the sect, he had never found a moment to release it, and then simply forgot. When the lion emerged, it blinked in shock, then fixed him with a pitiful gaze. Its ribs showed beneath the golden fur. "Don't look at me like that. I've been busy." He set a mountain of food from his storage bag before the creature. Its eyes flared. It fell on the meat without ceremony, devouring everything in minutes. He watched, a pang of guilt tightening his chest. He had effectively starved the beast for half a month. When the lion finally sat back, belly round and sides heaving, he asked, "Do you have a name of your own?" The lion shook its massive head, then winked, tongue lolling, performing a ridiculous, sycophantic bow. "You want me to choose one?" It shook its head again, then nodded vigorously. He hesitated. Naming had never been his strength. He studied the beast, its entire coat shimmering like molten gold, and said, "Then I'll call you Vorin. What do you think?" Vorin. The lion paused as if weighing the sound, then wagged its tail and barked twice, satisfied. "Good, Vorin. You'll live in the spirit beast house from now on." He left a generous supply of food, gave a few simple instructions, and departed. He was pleased with the dwelling, his mood light. He went straight to the secretum room, closed the door, and withdrew a stack of jade slips from his storage bag, probing each with his divine sense. One slip laid out the sect's rules, surprisingly lenient, and detailed the outer sect facilities, the mission pavilion, where disciples accepted tasks for contribution points, Aurelia Pavilion, where points were exchanged for elixirs, artifacts, or sold for profit, and the Lumineth, where outer disciples claimed basic cultivation techniques and purchased advanced ones. Every new disciple could visit the Lumineth once for a foundational method suited to their level. Anything stronger required points. Another slip listed the elders offering instruction during this period: Darius for transmission of skills, Shirith for Darneth, Sorrel for Phaleth, and Lyrael for weapon forging. All outer disciples were welcome to attend. "So this is a sect," he murmured. He finally understood why Zereth Immortal Sect was so strictly disciplined, yet so fiercely coveted. Abundant spiritual energy was only the beginning. Disciples could attend regular lectures from elders at the profound core realm and above instruction most outside families could never access. Even the Veilers of Iron Peak City, with Branner at the Tengara realm, had nothing comparable here. Seraphis realm experts were commonplace. The system was transparent: want something, complete the task, claim the reward. "This place is interesting," he said, eyes bright as he turned to the remaining slips. Mist clung to the fairy palace, a shroud over stone and silence. In his cave, Torin sat on a cold seat, eyes bloodshot, killing intent rolling off him in waves as he fixed the steward with a glare that could have cracked the walls. He had just stepped from the marrow-deep cleanser pool shade. The plan had been simple: leave the pool, drag Kalen before him, and wring the truth of that so-called opportunity from his brother's mouth. Instead, the steward waited in the misty immortal palace with news of what followed Gavrik's departure. Torin had never imagined the trash he dismissed would actually kill an outer disciple of the misty immortal palace. Gavrik might have been weak, but he wore the palace's name. When the outer sect elders learned of his death, they sent a steward to Iron Peak City demanding answers. That steward never reached the gates. The Borealis Pavilion master of the Aurelia Pavilion intercepted him, producing the life-or-death agreement between Kalen and Gavrik, claiming to have notarized the match. The duel had been fair, entirely Gavrik's doing. The misty immortal palace deacon could only return and report. Unwilling to provoke the Aurelia Pavilion over a dead outer disciple, the elders let the matter drop. "Kalen, you deserve to die," Torin seethed. He had asked for an opportunity, and been refused. His men had been killed for him. This was utter disgrace. "Young master, please calm down," the butler said from the side. Torin's cultivation had reached the great perfection of the Starfall transformation realm. Since the Marrow-Deep Cleansora poolshade, he had broken through several levels in succession. Damn it, why is this trash connected to the Borealis Pavilion master? He could not fathom how his brother had gotten acquainted with such a figure. "This, I do not know either. I only heard they met while buying birthday gifts for Garrick." The butler trembled under the terrifying aura. "Damn it. Are we just going to let him go like this?" Resentment twisted Torin's face. "Young master, I have an idea." Now that Kalen stood under the Borealis Pavilion master's protection, causing trouble would be far more difficult. "What is it? Tell me quickly." The butler nodded. "Young master, although the matter of Kalen killing the misty immortal palace disciple has been dropped, do not forget the palace never said we could not harm him. But he now has the Aurelia Pavilion backing him up." Torin frowned. "Young master, the Aurelia Pavilion only stepped in to protect Kalen if he had lost on the arena." "What do you mean?" Torin's eyes lit up. "Young master, although Kalen has a good relationship with the Borealis Pavilion master, that master cannot stay in Iron Peak City forever. When he leaves, you can challenge Kalen in public. The Aurelia Pavilion will not interfere. As long as you defeat him on the stage, anything goes." The butler grinned slyly. "Even if the Vela family had the audacity to do anything to you afterward." "Good idea." A ferocious smile spread across Torin's face. He wished he could skin his useless older brother alive immediately. "Young master, when shall we depart?" the butler asked, No rush, Torin's voice turned cold. I'm going into seclusion for a few days. I gained many benefits from the Marrow-Deep Clensura pool shade. Half a month should be enough to raise my cultivation to the Seraphis realm. At that time, young master, you are about to reach the Seraphis realm, the butler exclaimed in shock. Torin was only 16, he chuckled. So what if this piece of trash cultivates faster? In the end, he will still be trampled under my feet. When I return, it will be his death day. The butler immediately showered him with compliments. What neither knew was that Kaelin had already joined the Zereth Immortal sect as an outer disciple highly regarded by the elders, selected as the first pick. The butler had arrived right after Gavrik's death, so he knew nothing of what followed. More than a month had passed since Kaelin killed the misty Immortal Palace disciple, and Iron Peak City had settled into an uneasy calm. The insults stopped. The resistance to the Vela family faded. Then, half a month ago, fresh news stirred the city. The Jinx's son-in-law, the good-for-nothing cast out of the Korith family, had left for the Zereth Immortal sect as a disciple. In the interim, Kaelin had claimed all the city's attention. He defeated Thorn, the Vela family's genius, and killed misty Immortal Palace disciples. Thorn's own departure for the Fulgora sect drew only occasional mention. The Vela household had returned to something resembling normalcy. Draconis Mansion was filled with joy and harmony, at least on the surface. In the main hall, Garrick sat with the clan elders, discussing matters far weightier than domestic peace. Is the news accurate? Are the Luminar Patriarch and all the elders really dead? Absolutely, said the third elder. They contacted many assassins some time ago. It's unclear who the target was, but in the end, neither the Patriarch nor many elders returned. Garrick murmured, "A month ago, wasn't that precisely when Kaelin left?" The elders exchanged glances. The timing aligned. Could they have been going to assassinate him? Very possible. But why didn't anyone come back, and how is he doing now? They agreed to keep the matter secret and send someone to investigate. Meanwhile, Elara had reverted to her old ways, confined to her courtyard, gazing blankly eastward. Seraphina visited when she could. Thorn was gone. Kaelin was gone. Baldric had been released. But he moved through the mansion in a state of perpetual terror, as if he had committed some unspeakable crime. Kaelin spent a day and night in his cave, reading every jade slip and gaining a working understanding of the Zereth Immortal sect. Instead of rushing to cultivate, he slept. The abundant spiritual energy flowed into his body as he rested, a profound comfort. Just as Kaldor said, he smiled. Simply sleeping can enhance spiritual power and promote cultivation. His injuries had healed. His spiritual power was fully restored. The spiritual herbs in the astral chart of Evernite had helped, but the rich energy of the cave deserved the credit. Then the golden token in his storage bag pulsed with faint light. Someone had arrived outside. He didn't know many people in the sect, apart from Darius. No one should know he was here. The cave gate opened. 3 outer disciples in blue robes stood before him. He recognized one, Cedric, the disciple he had taught a lesson. Whatever brought them, it wasn't good. Kaelin, now that you've seen your senior brothers, why don't you come over and pay your respects? Cedric sneered. The 2 behind him looked Kaelin up and down. What are you doing here? Kaelin frowned, but his temper held. Cedric chuckled, unoffended. He gestured to his companions. This is senior brother Silvar, and this is senior brother Dernick. Let me be direct. Senior brother Silvar has his eye on your cave dwelling, and senior brother Dernick values your qualification to choose a low-rank earth-level cultivation technique. Kaelin's gaze turned cold, anger rising. Clean up the cave and give it to senior brother Silvar, Cedric said. Also exchange the Athoria technique senior brother Dernick wants and send it over. Otherwise, he let the threat hang. Silvar and Dernick watched with amusement, waiting. Then what happens if I don't give it to you? Kaelin spoke quietly, his eyes icy, a chill glinting in their depths. Cedric sneered. Hand it over, or I'll break your limbs first. This is the Zereth Immortal sect. I can't kill you openly, but you'd better watch yourself. You might lose your life at any moment. Silvar and Dernick sneered in unison. Both had reached the great perfection of the Starfall transformation realm, with 1 foot already in the Seraphis realm. They were prodigies who had joined the sect years ago with high initial rankings, yet neither had cracked the top 3. Yesterday Cedric had approached them with an offer. The outer sect selection winner was only at the 7th level of Starfall transformation, had no background, and was supposedly a live-in son-in-law. He had boasted and belittled Kaelin, calling him worthless. The bait was irresistible, the chance to become the top outer disciple without connections or backing. Both the cave dwelling and the Athoria cultivation technique were too tempting to pass up. At Cedric's instigation, they had come straight to force the cave's surrender. Finding it was child's play. With you, Kaelin sneered. Not qualified enough. A defeated opponent. Color flooded Cedric's face. The words struck home because they were true. Once a respected figure among outer disciples, his reputation had been ruined by a loss to someone who hadn't even joined the sect yet. He hadn't shown his face during the final days of the selection until he heard Kaelin had actually taken first place. Then he hatched this plan to have someone else do his dirty work. Kaelin, underestimating me is one thing, Cedric said coldly. But if you dare underestimate senior brothers Sylvar and Dernick, you have a death wish. They've already stepped 1 foot into the Seraphis realm. Hand over the cave if you know what's good for you, otherwise. Kaelin glanced at the two behind him, judging their auras. Their cultivation had surpassed great perfection. They stood on the threshold of the Seraphis realm. Breakthrough was only a matter of time. But so what? Get out. The single word fell cold from his lips, eyes icy. Cedric shouted in outrage. I said, all 3 of you get out of my cave. Kaelin's voice rose. Sylvar and Dernick, standing behind Cedric, looked dejected. The other party had just told the 3 of them to get lost. Kid, I'll give you another chance, Sylvar said, stepping forward. Killing intent radiated from him, cold and sharp. Nearly 2 meters tall, he cut a fierce, menacing figure. Take back what you said, or I won't just break your limbs. I might accidentally kill you. Dernick spoke from behind him, equally cold. Boy, we're giving you a chance. Hand over the cave and techniques, and we'll pretend you never spoke. Need anything in the sect later, drop our names, refuse, and we take your life today. Are the 3 of you deaf? Unmoved, Kaelin replied. I told you 3 to get out of my cave. You little brat. You're asking for it. Sylvar exploded. How dare a newly initiated disciple tell him to get lost? He was a prodigy with 1 foot in the Seraphis realm. When had he ever suffered such humiliation? An aura surpassing great perfection erupted. Muscles bulged, stretching his blue robe to its limit, his body brimming with power. Cedric retreated repeatedly, overjoyed yet fearful of accidental injury. Sylvar specialized in body training. His physical strength far exceeded ordinary cultivators. Even most early-stage Seraphis realm experts weren't his match in raw strength. Dernick didn't react much, just stared coldly. 7th level of Starfall transformation. They didn't take it seriously at all. Time had been too short. News of this year's selection hadn't spread. Naturally, they had no idea just how ruthless Kaelin was. Sylvar closed the distance in a few quick strides. Less than 100 meters vanished in a blink. He swelled further, making Kaelin look like a child before him. Kid, let me break your arms and legs first, then make you kneel and kowtow. He threw a punch at Kaelin's head. The strike cut through the air with a whoosh, surrounding vegetation trembling violently. Kaelin raised an eyebrow. His opponent was strong, but his face showed no fear. He stepped back, nimbly dodging. Sylvar was surprised. He hadn't expected a 7th-level cultivator to evade his strongest punch. Then came an even greater shock. After 2 steps, Kaelin steadied himself. His right hand flared with golden light. He formed the Gloomvale Lockhaven and blasted it forward. The move was more powerful, more terrifying than Sylvar's punch. Sylvar's heart clenched with crisis. His intuition screamed, if that connects, I die. He was a cultivator who had taken a half-step into the Tengara realm, his path rooted in physical body cultivation, a distinct advantage in close quarters. He crossed his arms before his chest just in time to meet the sudden, terrifying strike. The Gloomvale Lockhaven slammed into his guard with a deafening boom, a tremendous explosion rippling outward. The sickening crack of bone followed instantly. Sylvar stared, stunned. The moment his arm collided with the seal, his left forearm shattered, while the golden light on his opponent's right hand had yet to fade. He gritted his teeth and threw himself backward, stopping only after putting more than 10 meters between them. He had never expected such a devastating attack to materialize in an instant. Both arms were slick with blood. On the left, splintered bone protruded through torn flesh. Cedric and Dernick, standing behind him, recoiled, their expressions shifting drastically. They cried out, unable to believe that in a single exchange, Sylvar, halfway to the Tengara realm, had been beaten into this state. Sylvar felt the piercing agony in both arms. Looking down at the ruin of his limb, a cold wave of lingering fear washed over him. If he hadn't blocked, if that strike had landed true. The thought turned his face deathly pale and beaded his back with cold sweat. Dernick and Cedric rushed to his side. Seeing the injuries up close, shock froze their features. Cedric couldn't reconcile what he was seeing. A young man at the 7th level of the Starfall transformation realm, this strong. Dernick cursed under his breath. He and Sylvar had been friends for years, and the displayed strength shook him equally. He turned his gaze to Kaelin, voice cold. "Kid, I think you want to die." Dernick drew a mid-grade Ashen-level longsword, his eyes flat as he unleashed his half-step Tengora realm cultivation, attacking without hesitation. In his view, Sylvar had lost only through carelessness. He would use full strength from the first move, killing this 7th-stage Starfall transformation cultivator before him. If he and Sylvar also fell to a newly ascended disciple, they would be ashamed to face anyone, least of all Cedric, ever again. Unlike Sylvar, Dernick specialized in the sword. With a Brindor weapon in hand, his aura surged, radiating terrifying pressure. His face contorted with rage as he charged, each step intensifying his presence until the ground trembled violently. He held nothing back. Sylvar had been defeated in one blow through underestimation. Dernick would not make the same mistake. Kaelin frowned. A half-step Tengora realm cultivator demanded respect. He tapped his storage bag, and the Solare Hastile materialized in his grip. The longsword whistled through the air, its momentum fierce as a roaring beast, slashing down. The Solare Hastile, powerful as a true dragon, resonated with a clang and thrust upward to meet it. The spear deflected the blow effortlessly. Dernick frowned. He had poured everything into that strike, yet his opponent had blocked it with ease. Without pause, he reset and launched a renewed ferocious assault. His style bore some resemblance to Variks's, but he was far inferior. Varik could mobilize the power of an Ithoria magic weapon within his body. This offense was fierce, yet still no match for Kaelin. Kaelin's aura spiked. Gripping the Solare Hastile, he counterattacked. His speed surpassing Dernick's. Dernick cried out in surprise. Moments ago he had held the upper hand. In the blink of an eye he was on the defensive. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. What he could never have guessed was that their previous exchanges had merely been Kaelin testing the waters. He hadn't used his full strength at all. His recent battles had been against Varik and Isolde, both geniuses capable of challenging higher realms. Facing them, Kaelin couldn't accurately gauge his own combat ceiling. Dernick had inadvertently helped him find it. "Half-step to heaven," Kaelin muttered. His current strength should sit at the half-step Seraphis realm, and an ordinary half-step Seraphis cultivator would be no match for him. The Solare Hastile hummed. He increased his output by 3 points, shattered the longsword's defense, and drove the spear through Dernick's chest. The Solare Hastile was a Brindor magic weapon. As it pierced Dernick, he coughed blood, his aura collapsing instantly. Dernick roared in fury and swung his sword in a desperate arc at Kaelin's head. Kaelin let out a cold shout, snapped the spear back, and swept it horizontally across Dernick's abdomen. The blow launched Dernick backward like a kite with a severed string. He crashed heavily to the ground, vomiting blood, his face ashen. Sylvar, missing an arm, cried out. Ignoring his own injuries, he dragged his ruined body forward. Cedric was completely unhinged, staring at Kaelin with terrified eyes. His body trembled uncontrollably, he nearly collapsed. The opponent was monstrous. He had defeated 2 half-step Seraphis realm experts in succession without sustaining a scratch. Most importantly, his cultivation was only at the 7th level of the Starfall transformation realm. What was this? A genius? Absolutely not. This was a monster. An utterly terrifying monster. Cedric was consumed by regret. Why had he provoked this curse? They had even sent someone here to take revenge on this scoundrel. Sylvar reached Dernick's side and examined the injuries with a grim expression. Only one of Dernick's arms remained functional. The other hung immobile, though the bleeding had been staunched. "I'm fine," Dernick whispered, his voice barely audible. His wounds were worse than Sylvar's. A stab to the chest and a gunshot to the abdomen had his internal organs churning violently. Only his half-step Seraphis realm cultivation kept him conscious. "It's good you're all right," Sylvar exhaled in relief. A cold voice cut in from behind. "Are you sure you're all okay?" Kaelin sneered. "Seems this battle isn't over yet." His white robe fluttered as he approached, Solare Hastile in hand, a mocking smile on his face. "You Dernick tried to speak, but coughed up blood instead. Silvar's expression shifted drastically. He hurriedly begged. "This is all a misunderstanding. We believed Cedric's lies, that's why we came. Please let us leave and pretend nothing happened. We'll never bother you again." He shoved all blame onto Cedric, claiming they'd been misled into seizing the cave dwelling and techniques. "Misunderstanding?" Kaelin didn't slow his advance. "You came to seize my cave dwelling, steal my cultivation techniques, and attacked me directly, yet claim it's a misunderstanding because you were outmatched?" With each step, the pressure on the two injured men grew heavier. The handsome youth before them seemed less like a cultivator and more like a demon. "It's a misunderstanding. Cedric tricked us." Dernick wiped blood from his mouth, desperate. Both were too badly hurt to fight. Hearing them shift blame, Cedric's legs gave out, he collapsed, then scrambled up and fled. Kaelin was too terrifying. Staying meant death. Cedric moved with surprising speed, covering over 10 meters in a heartbeat. Then a silver spear whistled through the air, carrying crushing pressure. The dragon-patterned weapon pierced his right leg, pinning him to the ground. Cedric's face drained of color. Galvorn gushed from the wound, staining his robes crimson. Regret flooded him. Why had he provoked this evil star? "If you run again, the next shot goes through your heart," Kaelin stated coldly, not sparing a glance. Someone of Cedric's strength wasn't worth his attention. Terror froze Cedric in place. Silvar and Dernick watched, shocked. Cedric was at least 9th level Starfall Transformation Realm, yet this boy had pinned him effortlessly. And he was only at the 7th level. "Lord Koreth, please forgive us. We know we were wrong and accept punishment." "Lord Koreth, have mercy. We were misled by Cedric, we'll pay any price." Silvar and Dernick begged in unison, addressing him as Sir. Their earlier arrogance had vanished, cold sweat coated their pale faces. Not a shred of resistance remained. "Punish?" Kaelin paused, stroking his chin. He'd been considering the same problem. This was the Zareth immortal sect, killing them would violate sect rules. If not for that, he'd have acted already instead of walking over so leisurely. "My lord, please forgive us. We'll never dare again. We'll serve you as attendants, servants. It's all Cedric's fault, nothing to do with us." "My lord, name your price, just spare us this once." They pleaded shamelessly, no trace of the Seraphis realm cultivators they claimed to be. Kaelin continued forward, considering. He had no interest in followers, never needed anyone's care, and the star chart meant he preferred solitude. Stopping before them, he said calmly, "Hand over your storage bags." Silvar and Dernick didn't hesitate. Most cultivators carried their wealth on them, and these two scions of prominent families were no exception. Kaelin probed the bags with a wisp of divine sense. Delight flickered across his face. He tossed one lightly, satisfied. "Consider these your life-saving money. Any objections?" The two men were no longer defiant, only grateful to walk away with their lives. No problem," one said. Thank you, sir, the other replied. Kaelin smiled faintly, tucking the storage bags into his robes. He looked like any handsome young man now. No trace of the killing intent that had radiated from him moments before. Silvar and Dernick looked up, faces tense. They were terrified this jinx might turn on them. "Aren't you going to get lost, or do you want to stay for dinner?" Kaelin said calmly. The words felt like a pardon. Silvar was mobile enough, his arm the only real injury. Dernick endured the fire in his chest, gritted his teeth, and scrambled up, fleeing before Kaelin could change his mind. Watching them go, Kaelin suddenly remembered the third man. He turned to Cedric, still pinned to the ground by the Solare Hastael. Cedric trembled under that gaze. You stay away," he stammered, panic rising as Kaelin approached with a playful expression. "The Zareth immortal sect forbids killing among fellow disciples. You can't kill me? Don't come closer. I'm from the Varel family. If you kill me, the Varel family will never let you go." A long silence stretched. Cedric was babbling now, shouting threats he couldn't back. He had watched Kaelin dispatch 2 half-step Seraphis cultivators effortlessly. Resistance never crossed his mind. "Looks like your brain isn't as sharp as those two," Kaelin said, a faint smile on his lips. Silvar and Dernick had begged for mercy without invoking their families. They had sensed the truth. The greater the threat, the faster you died. Cedric felt the murderous aura rolling off Kaelin, suffocating in its intensity. He realized finally that this man intended to kill him. "I was wrong, Kaelin. No, sir, please forgive me," Cedric wept. He tried to kneel, but the spear through his thigh pinned him upright. "My lord, I'm just a dog. Please, forgive me." Regret hollowed him out. He wished he were dead. Kaelin looked down coldly. He had considered killing him. Yes, he hated being threatened above all else. But the sect's rules held. "If this weren't the Zereth Immortal sect, you would die today," he said calmly. "However, the death penalty can be waived." He moved, appearing before Cedric in a blink. Terror flooded Cedric's face. He opened his mouth to scream, but the sound died as Kaelin's feet descended, methodically stomping and shattering all four limbs. Bone ground to powder. Screams tore from Cedric's throat, raw and echoing, accompanied by wet, sickening cracks. Not far off, Silvar and Dernick froze. They recognized that voice. Resentment had burned hot for Cedric without him. They wouldn't be in this mess. But hearing those screams, a cold pang of sympathy stirred in them. When Kaelin stopped, Cedric lay trembling like broken clay, features distorted face, slick with terror and blood. Kaelin pulled the Solare Hastael free from the ruined thigh, then bent and stripped the storage bag from Cedric's body, pocketing it. "You should cherish the chance to live," he said, "and I hope you don't make this mistake again." He turned and walked back to his cave. Cedric, despicable as he was, posed no threat. Outside the sect, he would already be a corpse. The man's face was ruined, blood mingling with the foul stench of voided bowels. In that moment, he understood how precious life was. His limbs were dust, his storage bag gone. Alone, he gritted his teeth and began to crawl, writhing like a snake, driven by pure survival instinct. A cultivator's body surpassed a mortal's. The movement was only slower. Shattered bones could knit with miraculous medicines, given time. The shadow in his heart, though, would never fade. As for the man lying outside the cave, Kaelin had no interest in whether he lived or died. Back in the secret room, he opened the 3 storage bags. His mood lifted. Silvar and Dernick had been wealthy. Their 2 bags held 2,000 spirit stones between them, plus a heap of artifacts and pills. Cedric was poorer, but still yielded 500 spirit stones and miscellany. After sorting, Kaelin tallied his wealth, over 6,000 spirit stones. The disciple jade tokens of Silvar and his 2 companions were here too, their contribution points transferable. Kaelin rode the high of the Luminar slaughter, his storage bags heavy with spirit stones and the spoils of more than 20 dead cultivators. The road with Kaldor had been a butcher's alley, each ambush adding to the pile, yet now, an hour past the cave, a sour note twisted in his gut. He should have let Cedric walk away. The thought gnawed at him, unexpected and sharp. If he'd spared the boys, Cedric would have returned with reinforcements, more bags, more stones, a renewable harvest. He clenched his fists, the regret so vivid he nearly turned back to find the man, to offer false comfort and a second chance at victimhood. Impulsive, he chided himself, forcing the urge down. Next time he pulled the 3 identity tablets from his robe and probed them with divine sense. Silvar, 1990, Dernick, 100. Cedric, 40. A pity about the last. Without hesitation, he chanted the transfer incantation. Isara's jade slip had taught him. Blue light washed over his own tablet. The number settled at 280. Not insignificant. The combined wealth of 2 half-step Seraphis cultivators hadn't reached 200. This placed him comfortably among the outer sect's elite, whatever that meant in practice. He stretched, joints popping, and rose. An hour was long enough. Kaldor might need aid, and the cave, well, Isolde and Varric could handle themselves. What concerned him was opportunists scenting an unclaimed dwelling. He'd defend it on principle, asking nothing in return. The map in Ysara's slip led him to Aurelia Pavilion, central hub of the outer gate, flanked by Rivara and Valora Wilden pavilions. He had 2 materials still to source for the Astravi Pilvora, heart-binding leather and Octavra Divorn spirit Galvorn, the dried Ithriel Lyrandel he could buy outright now. The outer sect sprawled farther than he'd imagined. Marble avenues cut through districts that resembled nothing so much as a mortal city. Restaurants, tea-houses, gambling dens, stalls thick as ants. Blue-robed outer disciples moved through grey-robed menials in numbers he couldn't count. None of this appeared in Isara's slip. The sect tolerated, perhaps even encouraged, the commerce. Aurelia Pavilion rose ahead. He entered without pause. The first floor alone held thousands, 500 blue robes at a glance, the rest grey, menials, 80% women, clustering around disciples like attendants at court, some guided with bowed heads, others hawked wares with practiced volume. A grey-robed woman detached herself from the crowd, smiling. "Senior, what do you need?" Kalin rode the high of the Luminar slaughter, his storage bags heavy with spirit stones and the spoils of more than 20 dead cultivators. The road with Kaldor had been a butcher's alley, each ambush adding to the pile. Yet now, an hour past the cave, a sour note twisted in his gut. He should have let Cedric walk away. The thought gnawed at him, unexpected and sharp. If he'd spared the boy, Cedric would have returned with reinforcements, more bags, more stones, a renewable harvest. He clenched his fists, the regret so vivid he nearly turned back to find the man, to offer false comfort and a second chance at victimhood. Impulsive, he chided himself, forcing the urge down. Next time, he pulled the 3 identity tablets from his robe and probed them with divine sense. Silvar 1990, Dernick 100, Cedric 40. A pity about the last. Without hesitation he chanted the transfer incantation Isara's jade slip had taught him. Blue light washed over his own tablet. The number settled at 280. Not insignificant. The combined wealth of 2 half-step Seraphis cultivators hadn't reached 200. This placed him comfortably among the outer sex elite, whatever that meant in practice. He stretched, joints popping, and rose. An hour was long enough. Kaldor might need aid, and the cave, well, Isolde and Varric could handle themselves. What concerned him was opportunists scenting an unclaimed dwelling. He'd defend it on principle, asking nothing in return. The map in Isara's slip led him to Aurelia Pavilion, central hub of the outer gate, flanked by Ravara and Valora Wilden pavilions. He had 2 materials still to source for the Astravi Pilvora, heart-binding leather and Octavra Divorn Spirit Galvorn, the dried Ithriel Lirandel he could buy outright now. The outer sect sprawled farther than he'd imagined. Marble avenues cut through districts that resembled nothing so much as a mortal city. Restaurants, tea-houses, gambling dens, stalls thick as ants. Blue-robed outer disciples moved through grey-robed menials in numbers he couldn't count. None of this appeared in Isara's slip. The sect tolerated, perhaps even encouraged, the commerce. Aurelia Pavilion rose ahead. He entered without pause. The first floor alone held thousands, 500 blue robes at a glance, the rest grey, menials, 80% women, clustering around disciples like attendants at court, some guided with bowed heads, others hawked wares with practiced volume. A grey-robed woman detached herself from the crowd, smiling. "Senior, what do you need?" "I can help." Kalin turned and studied the woman. Her aura placed her at the 4th level of the Starfall transformation realm, respectable, with fair skin and features that would be considered above average anywhere else. "Hello. I'd like the heart-binding leather and the Octavra Divorn Spirit Galvorn." He was polite enough, aside from enemies. He was generally easygoing. Octavra Divorn Spirit Galvorn, heart-binding leather. The grey-robed woman murmured the names and Kalin realized she had never heard of them. Understandable, both items were extraordinarily precious, far beyond the reach of ordinary disciples. "Senior brother, come with me. Those would be classed as spiritual herbs, correct?" "I'll take you to them," she said with a sweet smile. He nodded. Delighted, she waved him forward. "This way, senior brother." She led him through the dense crowd. "I've only just started learning. You don't need to call me senior brother." "Senior brother, you're new, so you may not know. In the Zareth Immortal Sect, grey-robed disciples address blue-robed disciples and above as senior brother, regardless of how long they've been here," she explained as they walked. Kalin nodded slightly. "Why are there so many grey-robed disciples here? And most of them women?" "Contribution points." Her smile dimmed. "The difference between menial and outer disciples is that outer disciples and above don't have to do tasks for points. They still receive basic cultivation techniques. Menial disciples have no such privilege. Only a few are assigned specific duties. The rest must scrape together points on their own. Our cultivation is low, so we can't take dangerous tasks. We serve outer disciples at Aurelia Pavilion, earning a commission on each transaction." Her words clarified the sect's inner workings. It was a holy land for cultivation, yet without talent or strength, one survived only through grunt work. The girl guiding him, for instance, had reached the 4th level of Starfall transformation at a young age. Back home she'd be a prodigy. Here, She couldn't even become an outer disciple. Because he seemed decent and was a newcomer, she shared a great deal about the outer sect, much of it absent from the jade slip he'd received. Aurelia Pavilion was packed, and the spiritual medicine counter lay deep inside. A full quarter-hour later they finally arrived, only to find a line. The girl waited patiently beside him. As they grew more comfortable, she introduced herself. "Senior brother, I'm Ilariel. May I ask your name?" "Kalen." "Kalen." She repeated it softly, the name ringing a faint bell she couldn't quite place. Another quarter-hour passed before his turn came. He asked the shopkeeper, "Do you have Octavra Divorn spirit, galvorn and heart-binding leather?" "Yagami's galvorn and heart-binding leather." The herbalist gave him a strange look. 9 times out of 10, an unfamiliar face meant a new disciple. "I don't carry the Octavra Divorn spirit galvorn, but I do have the heart-binding leather. It costs 200 contribution points for a small piece, likely more than you can afford." "How many?" The shopkeeper grinned. 200. The leather was exorbitant. He clearly didn't expect Kalen to pay. "Done." The shopkeeper in the herbal medicine section stared, nonplussed. Beside him, Ilariel stood equally stunned. When she had first heard the figure 200 contribution points, she had nearly cried out. Before she could recover, the young man at her side had simply agreed. 200 points, converted to spirit stones, that was 10,000. Wasn't this handsome youth a newly initiated disciple of the Zareth Immortal sect? Where had he acquired such wealth? In a heartbeat, a dozen questions crowded her mind. "Kid, you're not joking," the shopkeeper said, eyeing him with open skepticism. "You actually have 200 contribution points? Only a handful of outer sect disciples could command that sum, and this unfamiliar face claimed it as casually as pocket change." Kalen nodded, calm. He knew the amount was considerable, though not its precise conversion. The outer sect selection winner received 50 points. After entering, he had relieved Silvar and his 2 companions of over 200 in a single stroke. It had come too easily. The shopkeeper studied him a moment longer, then shrugged and withdrew to fetch the heart-binding leather. He returned cradling a wooden box, handling it with the care reserved for Aurelia Pavilion's rarest medicinal ingredients. "This is it. Are you certain?" "Certain. Provided it's genuine." The lid lifted. Inside lay a purple flower stalk from which 2 leather-like vines intertwined, the source of the name for Save the Bloom at the apex. The stem was indistinguishable from cured hide. The flower itself was startlingly vivid, and though it sat without soil, it showed no sign of withering. Ilariel's eyes brightened at the sight. Kalen examined it closely, satisfaction rising. This was unmistakably heart-binding leather, one of the 3 primary components for refining the Astravi Pilvora. "Then I'll take it." He produced his identity jade token from his storage bag without hesitation. Both shopkeeper and Ilariel watched, bewildered. He truly meant to spend 200 points without a second thought. The shopkeeper offered his own token. A blue filament of light bridged them. Kalen's balance dropped from 280 to 80. The shopkeeper verified the transfer, and his gaze grew stranger still. Who exactly was this disciple? The queue behind them stirred with the same disbelief. Most had assumed he was jesting. None expected him to follow through. With the transaction complete, Kalen felt a quiet relief. One concern settled. Now he needed only the Octavra Divorn spirit galvorn to assemble every material for the Astravi Pilvora. Ilariel's face flushed with excitement. Aurelia Pavilion awarded her 10% of a customer's expenditure as commission, 20 points, enough to exchange for a common low-grade Ashen-level magic weapon. Kalen turned to leave. Ilariel saw him off with a warm smile, still marveling that a newly initiated disciple could command such resources. He departed under the crowd's astonished gazes, a communication jade slip pressed into his hand. She urged him to contact her should he return. He accepted it. He had grown fond of the woman who had taken the trouble to answer his questions. Communication jade slips were costly, their price scaling with transmission distance. Even the poorest quality ran to several hundred spirit stones. She had gone to considerable lengths to ensure his return. Outside the pavilion, Kalen turned his thoughts to provisions. The outer sect provided free meals, but he had no desire to waste time traveling there daily. Besides, a golden lion waited at home with an appetite to match its size. Dried meat vendors lined the thoroughfare, all servants or apprentices in grey robes. Ilariel had explained that these menial disciples labored hard for every contribution point. He had not fully grasped it then. Now, watching a cultivator at the 4th or 5th level of the Starfall transformation realm hawking strips of jerky, he understood. In the outer cities, only ordinary residents would bother with such things. Kalen could only sigh. The path of cultivation was not easy. He visited 3 or 4 jerky stalls where the meat came from ordinary wild beasts, creatures that had yet to awaken intelligence. Servants captured them in the mountains and forests, then processed the meat for sale. Dried meat could be bought with contribution points or spirit stones, since these were not sect-run businesses. 1 spirit stone bought 10 catties of decent jerky, 10 times the price outside. But this was the Zareth Immortal sect. The markup made sense. When he learned that a single contribution point could purchase 500 catties, he gasped. It was the first time he truly grasped how valuable contribution points were. He estimated the heart-binding leather he had just bought cost 200 points, equivalent to 10,000 spirit stones. The knowledge made his heart bleed. He didn't spend more points. Instead, he used spirit stones to buy several thousand catties and left. He had plenty of stones now, and his mindset had shifted from that of a poor man. He no longer felt the pinch as before. In the sect, spirit stones could be exchanged for contribution points at the Valora Wilden Pavilion at a 1:50 ratio. He was about to leave when a familiar voice drifted over. "Let me tell you, Kalen, who won first place in this year's outer sect selection, is my older brother. We're really close. We've been through thick and thin. Didn't you see we lived together in Glimmer Number Miravel back then? Don't worry, if anyone bullies you, just tell me. I'll go to my older brother, Kalen." Silence fell. The chubby Kaldor was boasting to a group of newly initiated blue-robed disciples, patting his chest and promising to follow their example. He had a smooth personality and made friends quickly wherever he went. The people around him believed him without a doubt, looking at him with admiration, including many of the female disciples. They were all new outer disciples living in the same area, and Kaldor had become familiar with them in less than a day. "Kaldor, what are you saying here?" At the sound of that voice, Kaldor and the others turned to see Kalen. "Big brother," Kaldor shouted, so excited he rushed over and hugged him tightly. Kalen was speechless, but since they did have a fairly good relationship, he didn't say anything. Just pushed him away with a hint of disgust. "What were you saying just now?" he asked, having only vaguely heard. Kaldor coughed. "It's nothing." His face flushed slightly. After all, he had been using Kalen's name to fool quite a few people recently. "Brother, do you have your own cave dwelling now?" Kaldor's eyes gleamed. Kalen nodded. "Then take me on a tour. I've never seen what a cave looks like before." The chubby boy's face trembled with excitement. "Okay, come with me." Kalen was speechless, but he didn't refuse. Kaldor exchanged a few words with the blue-robed disciples around him, then followed Kalen away. Under envious gazes, they went further and further. The new disciples were also eager to see what an inner cave of the Zareth Immortal sect looked like. It was a pity they weren't familiar with Kalen. Besides, he was a ruthless figure. They had all witnessed firsthand how vicious he could be, and they didn't even dare breathe loudly in front of him. Kalen led Kaldor back to the cave. Along the way, the chubby boy talked on and on, recounting what had happened that day. After they were taken away by the outer sect stewards, each had been given a blue robe, an identity token, a jade slip, and a small courtyard, much better than Glimmer Number of Alaval, with richer spiritual energy inside. Since they were all disciples who entered the sect together, Kaldor got along well with everyone. Mirabelle and Merrick also lived in the same area. "Brother, is this your cave dwelling?" Upon arriving at the entrance, Kaldor looked around. The spiritual energy here was abundant. Every breath made him feel refreshed. "That's right." With a thought, the cave door opened. Upon entering, the chubby boy's jaw nearly dropped. The interior was incredibly luxurious, and the spiritual energy was many times richer than where he lived. Seeing him practically drooling, Kalen thought for a moment and said, "If you want to live here, you can move in with me." Kaldor's eyes lit up, but then he shook his head. "No, I prefer a more lively place. It's more comfortable to stay where there are more people." He enjoyed being around people, but the main reason was that he and Kalen were just friends. Relying on each other too much would spoil the relationship. Kalen nodded without saying anything. The chubby boy looked around, growing more excited as he went. Kalen released Vorin and threw it a lot of jerky. The golden lion's eyes lit up and it rushed over to devour it. "Big brother, what kind of spirit beast is this Vorin?" the chubby boy asked. Kalen shook his head. "I don't know." "That's strange." Normal spirit beasts can understand human speech once they've developed intelligence, and by then they should be able to speak. But Vorin understands human speech yet can't speak. And he looks so imposing and intimidating, yet his strength is so weak. That shouldn't be the case, Kaldor analyzed from the side. Vorin, busy eating dried meat, twitched his ears and heard the chubby boy talking badly about him. He turned around and grinned at Kaldor, letting out a howl as if protesting his discontent. Kaldor stared at the lion for a long moment, then shook his head. This beast is genuinely intelligent. It understands insults. It was common sense, really, something Kalen already knew, but he had no real measure of what Vorin was, nor much knowledge of spirit beasts at all. I'll find some books on them when I have time, he thought, letting the matter drop. An hour later, Kaldor left a communication jade slip with his address and a promise to visit often. The Zareth immortal sect was vast, its outer disciples left largely to their own devices, with no one overseeing their cultivation. Kalen emptied the dried meat from his storage bag and retreated to the secretum room. After his recent battles, he sensed the 8th level of the Starfall transformation realm within reach, yet he chose to linger at the 7th, honing his foundation. He still had one more selection of a low-level martial art, and planned to visit the library once seclusion ended. The jade slip notes Sorrel's alchemy lecture in 5 days. I should attend, he murmured. Formations, weapon crafting, alchemy, none of the elders' lessons can be missed. Before entering seclusion, he committed the teaching schedules to memory. Alchemy was a noble pursuit. The Astravi Pilvora he required demanded at least a 3rd-grade alchemist. Weapon crafting produced everything from artifacts to communication slips, formations, even in the hands of a weak master could bridge cultivation gaps and kill the strong. He wanted all 3. Inside the secretum room, he closed his eyes and sank into the astral chart of Evernight. Spirit stones in hand, bolstered by the spiritual medicines and herbs he had consumed, he climbed through the early stage of the 7th level, its great perfection, the mid-stage and its perfection, the late stage, and finally its peak. 3 days later, he opened his eyes. His cultivation had consolidated at the 7th level zenith. He could break through to the 8th if he wished, but the combat gain would be marginal. Better to refine himself here. It's time, he said, rising. Today he would choose a low-level technique at the library. The Misty Immortal Palace's library had a long history, split between inner and outer collections. The outer library, serving the Zareth sect's outer disciples, still held countless precious volumes including numerous low-grade Ithoria techniques. The inner library was rumored to contain not only more Ithoria arts but the legendary Celestera techniques as well, though those remained stories. Following the Jade Slip's directions, Kalen found the outer library's entrance. It lacked the bustle of the Zephyr Isara Zorath or the Aurelia Pavilion. Instead, it felt deserted. 2 white-haired elders sat at a stone table, drinking tea and playing chess with perfect composure. Seniors, I'd like to enter and select a cultivation technique, Kalen said. They glanced over. One spoke calmly. Exchanging contribution points or claiming a reward? Reward, he offered his jade token. The elder took it, surprise flickering across his face before he studied Kalen anew. Ithoria technique, he said, pausing. So you're the freak from this year's cohort? Freak, Kalen blinked. He sensed no malice, only curiosity, and the elder's cultivation was unfathomable. The second old man lifted his head, eyes sharp with interest. Heat rose in Kalen's cheeks. Senior, may I go in? Go. Low-level techniques are on the 3rd floor. Your token grants entry. The first elder tossed the token back, his expression settling. His companion did the same, and they returned to their game. Kalen bowed, momentarily at a loss, then entered. Outside, the elders resumed their conversation via divine sense. Top of this year's outer selection, one clicked his tongue. Truly, at the 7th level. That's not what Kaldric reported, he said early 7th. Just now I sensed late 7th. Another breakthrough? If so, he earns the name. The girl before him was 9th level, but I'd wager even a half-step Seraphis expert couldn't match her. Unaware, Kalen stepped into a different world. The exterior was unremarkable. Inside, the first floor unfolded into towering bookshelves carved with lifelike dragons, each shelf holding a single manual. The character Huang, yellow, marked every shelf. Yellow ranked techniques, he murmured. Disciples moved between the aisles, examining volumes with care. He bypassed them, heading straight for the stairs. His destination was the third floor. We ascended to the second floor. The layout mirrored the first, though fewer bookshelves lined the walls, and the character on each had shifted from Huang to Xuan. As expected, this level held only mysterious rank techniques. Yet the atmosphere differed sharply from the floor below. Clusters of outer disciples in blue robes huddled in one corner, whispering with strange expressions, some wide-eyed, others murmuring praise, a few speculating on what rare treasures the object of their attention might seek. Curiosity stirred. An Etheria cultivation technique held value but no irresistible pull. The astral chart of Evernite rested in my possession, and my current method, the Miravel transformations, was already an earth-rank art. I wanted to see what had captured everyone's gaze. I approached the group and followed their line of sight, and the breath caught in my throat. A woman stood before a shelf, robed in white, her figure curvaceous and near perfect, her features so exquisite they seemed sculpted by the heavens themselves. Yet a layer of icy frost masked her face, radiating a coldness that kept the world at distance. Isolde. I hadn't expected her here. Though it made sense, she too held the right to enter the library and select an Ashen rank technique. She seemed to sense my presence, her brows furrowing as she turned. Our eyes met. Kaelin. The word carried murderous intent. She had found me standing at the fringe of a pack of leering men, and her judgment was instantaneous. In that moment, I understood exactly where the word lecher came from. Every outer disciple who had been spying on her snapped their heads toward me. Curiosity, envy, jealousy, doubt, their eyes past the impossible. How could a cultivator at the 7th level of the Starfall transformation realm know a woman like her? The scrutiny vanished as quickly as it had gathered. Once discovered, the disciples scattered, busying themselves with feigned indifference, pretending they had never stared. I stood alone in the sudden clearing. "Would you believe me if I said I just arrived?" she sneered. "You lecherous scoundrel. You tried to deny it last time. Let's hear your excuse now." My head throbbed. Her voice carried, and every gaze on the second floor pivoted toward me, including those who had been spying moments before, disgust now uniform across all faces. Even the female cultivators looked at me with contempt. The weight of those stares made me want to vanish. The injustice burned. I wanted to scream that I was no lecher. Honestly, so young and good-looking, yet a pervert. No wonder. That new junior sister is so beautiful. It's normal for him to be attracted at such a young age. Women whispered among themselves. Shameless. They stare at pretty girls constantly. We're ashamed to share the same air. This person looks unfamiliar, newly initiated perhaps. Never seen a fairy-like figure before, so she's surprised. If this weren't the library, I'd teach him a lesson. That's right, me too. Male disciples joined the chorus, some threatening violence. Hatred rose hot in my chest. Why had I indulged my curiosity? And several of the men now mocking me had been standing right beside me, stealing glances of their own. Isolde said nothing. She surveyed the would-be avengers with disdain. Their cultivation hovered at the 7th or 8th level of the Starfall transformation realm. Where did they find their confidence? They couldn't defeat her. Otherwise they would have already moved. I glared at the lot of them. Those unafraid of death can try. A few flinched, a chill crawling down their spines. But none were fools. They talked. They did not act. If this isn't the library, just wait. Empty threats. I glanced helplessly at Isolde in that moment. I realized her mind truly wasn't functioning well. I didn't peek at you. I left the words hanging and turned toward the stairs. The second floor had become unbearable. I needed the third. Laughter followed me. Go to the third floor? Is he dreaming? Without 500 merit points, how could he possibly? That place is all dirt. The words died unspoken. I strode up the staircase without encountering a single restriction. The cultivators left on the second floor stood dumbfounded. They never imagined the lecherous thief they'd just mocked would actually reach the third floor. Each level of the library was sealed by restrictions only the 2 elders at the entrance could lift, each visit requiring a fresh decree on their jade tablets. The requirements were punishing. The first floor, marked with a yellow character, demanded 20 contribution points for basic cultivation techniques. The second, mysterious, required 100 for low grade, 150 for mid-grade, 300 for high grade. The third tier, earth, asked 500 points for even the lowest Etheria technique, and no one spoke of what lay beyond. That person really went up. Am I seeing things? I saw him too. Who is he? I don't know, never seen him before. New disciple this year? The crowd fell silent. Then the second floor erupted in fresh speculation. Isolde glanced at the stunned faces around her, then turned back to the shelves with deliberate casualness. Her eyes held resentment. The opportunity had been so close. The male disciples who had mocked Kaelin stared at each other in bewilderment. They'd only dared because his aura showed merely the 7th level of starfall transformation, hoping to win the beauty's favor. Now they all chose to flee. They could pick a Brindor technique later. Anyone who could reach the 3rd floor was not to be trifled with. The 3rd floor was nothing like the first 2. Barely 20 bookshelves stood where hundreds had filled each lower level, but Etheria techniques were that rare, even for a sect as powerful as Zereth Immortal Sect. Only 3 people occupied the space, including Kaelin. The other 2, a man and a woman, looked up at his arrival. The woman's eyes held curiosity, as if she'd never seen him before. In the entire outer sect, only a handful could reach this level. The minimum was 500 contribution points, countless difficult tasks for a single opportunity. Kaelin studied the pair. The man was handsome and distinguished, commanding in a blue robe. The woman was equally beautiful, her figure radiating a hot, charming allure. Both exuded powerful auras, yet their cultivation levels were imperceptible, a dangerous presence emanating from them. The Seraphis realm, Kaelin murmured. He was certain these 2 were Tengara realm cultivators. They looked at him a few more times, seemed to reach some conclusion, then returned their attention to the shelves. He approached without speaking and began examining the techniques. Before even touching them, he sensed a powerful restriction on each ancient carved shelf. This formation is incredibly powerful. All the shelves were sealed with a powerful array. Without a secret command or incantation, retrieving the techniques inside was impossible. Any attempt would forcibly destroy them. The Zereth Immortal Sect is indeed extraordinary. The same prohibitions must have been placed on the first 2 floors as well. He examined the shelves before him. Each technique's name was clearly recorded and described in detail. Aetherwin Brindara Sindral, Earth rank low grade. Dorvith Ervin, a low-grade Earth-level sword. He grasped the library's model, though not yet how to retrieve a technique. Once you've decided on the desired cultivation method, simply take out your jade token and place it in the recessed area on the bookshelf. A woman's voice came from beside him. He turned to find the fiery beauty speaking. "Thank you, senior sister." He clasped his hands. She smiled without restraint, a carefree personality evident. "Junior brother, are you the winner of this year's selection competition?" He nodded. "Not bad. I heard first place in this year's outer sect selection was a little guy at the 7th level of starfall transformation. I didn't expect it to be you." She smiled. "My name is Philora, junior brother. What's yours?" "Kaelin, good name, not bad." Philora praised him, then smiled. "All right, let's choose a cultivation technique. It's a rare opportunity to obtain an Etheria technique, so choose carefully. Otherwise you don't know when you'll be able to come again." He nodded his thanks. Philora left with a smile to continue her own selection, while the handsome male disciple only glanced at Kaelin once from beginning to end. Kaelin knew the other person meant well in reminding him. As a member of a small family, he knew all too well how precious Etheria cultivation techniques were. Kaelin had no use for basic techniques. His path lay in shattering the stars of the astral chart of Evernite, and the Miravel transformations of Starfall transformation would carry him to the Seraphis realm. Beyond that, deeper methods awaited. He scanned the shelves for martial arts, movement techniques, or secret arts, anything to supplement his core cultivation. Althoria Sindral Mirathorn, Silphara Valoria Palmaris, Albinor Eldorath Madman's Staff, all Earth rank, low grade, none suited him. Then his gaze caught on a fragment, a low-grade Etheria scroll, its edges worn by time. A movement technique of Earth rank can increase one's speed. At advanced stages, it allows for instantaneous teleportation. His interest sharpened. However, this technique is incomplete and extremely difficult to cultivate. No one has ever mastered it to perfection. Therefore, it is classified as an Etheria technique. The ancient method Valerius had mentioned. Broken, incomplete, but the foundation was extraordinary. If whole, it would rank at least high-grade Earth. "I'll take it." He pressed his identity jade token to the shelf's receptor. The carved dragon flared faintly, confirming the withdrawal, then dimmed. The restriction lifted. He pulled the manual free. Fenera Galdrin Fenris Baldric. Junior brother, you've chosen this cultivation technique. Flora and the handsome young man at the adjacent shelf both turned, the security trigger drawing their attention. Surprise flickered across their faces. Kaelin nodded seriously. I feel this technique is good. I want to learn it. Flora pressed a hand to her face. The young man's lips curled in disbelief before he dismissed Kaelin entirely, returning to his own selection. Didn't I tell you to choose carefully? Flora's voice carried exasperation. Do you know how rare it is to reach the 3rd level and select an Earth rank technique? And you pick an incomplete one no one has ever mastered. Kaelin paused. Senior sister, is it truly that difficult? Certainly. It's said to be a Celestera technique, but the missing core content makes its mysteries nearly impenetrable. You've wasted your chance, she sighed. Sigh. He had expected difficulty, not impossibility, yet he felt no regret. His core methods were secure. Movement was precisely what he lacked. Thank you for your guidance, senior sister. He clasped at his hands, genuine in his gratitude. All right, it's done. No point saying more. I hope you accumulate more contribution points before your next visit. She waved him off, a flicker of pity in her expression. Many outer disciples never reached the 3rd floor at all, and he had squandered the opportunity on a dead end. Kaelin thanked her again and descended. The 2nd floor fell silent as he appeared at the stairwell. Most disciples lingered on the 3rd level for hours, studying every option. He had been gone less than half an hour. His gaze swept the room. Isolde stood among the shelves, already watching him. Without a word, he turned and continued downstairs. Women and petty people are the hardest to deal with. He had no desire to be called a lecher in public again. He didn't see Isolde's face harden further, frost settling over her already cold features as he fled. Am I really that scary? You run the moment you see me, lecherous thief. How hateful. Kaelin didn't dawdle. He reached the 1st floor and strode from the library's main entrance, startling the 2 elders drinking tea and playing chess by the door. Though they didn't turn, their cultivation was high enough to sense him without looking. They turned in unison, gazes settling on him. This little guy came out fast. Can choosing a low-level technique really be that quick? One elder couldn't resist asking, have you chosen your cultivation method? Kaelin smiled and nodded. I have. Which one? Fenara Galdrin Fenris Baldric. He didn't hide it. The stars shift and the seasons change. Both elders were visibly stunned. Even their composure cracked, an Ethoria technique on the first try. What a waste. They knew its difficulty all too well. The contents were severely incomplete. No one had ever successfully cultivated it. One elder wore a helpless expression. This method is nearly impossible to master. I can make an exception, let you choose another. In his view, Kaelin must not understand the 3rd level's value or this technique's difficulty. He offered a second chance, a rare favor granted only because the youth was young and extraordinarily talented. Huldris Kaelin clasped his hands in salute. Thank you, seniors. I only want to try cultivating Fenara Galdrin Fenris Baldric. The elders said no more. Since it was his choice, they couldn't persuade him further. The other elders spoke. Each technique has a 1-month cultivation period and cannot be copied. Once copied, it destroys itself and must be returned after 1 month. The library's rule, all lent techniques were original ancient books, extremely precious, was recorded on the jade slip Cyphor had given him. Yes. Kaelin bowed again. He knew all this. Never mind, since few choose this technique anyway, take your time with it. Pyrolis waved his hand and opened a back door. The other elder laughed. Pyrolis, you think highly of this kid? He looked at Kaelin, smiling. Young man, not bad. Since Pyralis has spoken, you needn't rush to return it. Kaelin was stunned. Could it be like this? Thank you both, seniors. He clasped his hands again. Go, I hope you succeed in your studies. Pyrolis shooed him off. Kaelin nodded, genuine respect in him. They weren't related, yet they'd granted him special treatment. He knew without doubt that extending the return deadline for an Ethoria technique was a tremendous favor. He left. The elders resumed their telepathic chat. Pyrolis, giving special treatment is unlike you, especially for a low-level technique. Aren't you afraid of being discovered? So what if they find out? Besides, the kid's good. I feel he can learn it. Fine, whatever you want. Nobody practices the Ethoria technique anyway. It's sat on the 3rd level for ages. Kaelin bought dried meat and returned straight to his cave. eager to see just how remarkable Fenara Galdrin Fenris Baldric truly was. The jerky was for Vorin. The Golden Lion's eyes lit up at the sight, and he rushed over to devour it greedily. Kaelin ignored him and entered the secret room. Tomorrow is the day Sorrel teaches the alchemy class, he murmured the reminder. He couldn't miss it. Today, he would study the shifting of stars and constellations. Time Flies currently judged low-grade Earth rank. He opened the ancient book. From outside it appeared complete, but inside the pages were yellowed and brittle, a faint musty rot rising from them. He read carefully, turning page by page. Before jade slips, most cultivation manuals were passed down on paper or stone. His brows furrowed deeper with each page. His expression grew grave. An hour passed. He set the book down. This technique is far too incomplete, less than 70%. It's missing everything at crucial points. He was speechless, regret stirring. He considered returning to the library, finding Pyralis at the entrance. The elder had offered another chance. Never mind. Continue the research. After a moment's hesitation, he abandoned the thought of switching. He'd chosen this path. He'd finish it, even if he had to crawl. Another hour passed. He gained some understanding but remained far from cultivation. All his effort collapsed into a sigh. Never mind. Just as he was about to give up, the star chart on his chest suddenly reacted.